2021 as we celebrate the 40th anniversary of the start of Sahaja Yoga in Canada when Shri Mataji first arrived in Vancouver, Canada in October 1981. So today, with an informal chai and chat, we invite the early Sahaja Yogis from Canada. So we have with us Patrick Redican from India, and we have his wife, our sweet Pradnya, also from India. Patrick, you live in Jejuri, Maharashtra, right? So looks like my internet connection may be a little bit off. I apologize for that.
No, we're all muted.
Muted myself.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I'm starting my video. Apologies, my video was not on. So we have Patrick and Pradnya Redican from India. We have Mark and Linda Taylor from USA. We have Edward Sogstad and hopefully Bridget, also from Austria. And with Felicity joining us, as well as representing her husband, one of the early yogis, Richard Payment, and Felicity joins us from UK. And of course, co-hosting with me today is Moh Gulati. For those of you know him, he is also an early yogi, coming to yoga really as a child. So welcome today and welcome early yogis and all our brothers and sisters from across Canada. Jai Shri Mataji. So we invite our elder brother, Patrick, to please lead a short meditation with the Canadian Sangha and with the yogis who have joined us here from around the world. Jai Shri Mataji. So we can all mute ourselves.
The first thing, I've just seen this video where Shri Mataji does this, and I thought it was interesting. So I thought maybe we could do it because we're all Sahaja Yogis. So before taking bandhana, raising kundalini, put your attention on your heart. And what you have to do is invite your guru into your heart. So I presume you know this prayer. Shri Mataji, please come into my heart. Let me clean my heart so that you are there. Please put your feet into my heart. Let your feet be worshipped in my heart. Take away my delusions. Keep me away from illusion. Keep me in reality. Take away the sheen of superficiality. Let me enjoy your feet in my heart. Let me see your feet in my heart. We do Shri Ganesha's mantra. Om Tvameva Sakshat Shri Ganesha Sakshat Shri Adi Shakti Mataji Shri Nirmala Devi Namo Namo. Om Tvameva Sakshat Shri Mahalakshmi Maha Saraswati, Maha Kali Trigunatmika, Kundalini Sakshat, Shri Adi Shakti Mataji, Shri Nirmala Devi Namo Namo. Om Twameva Sakshat, Shri Kalaki Sakshat, Shri Adi Shakti Mataji, Shri Nirmala Devi Namo Namo. Om Twameva Sakshat, Shri Kalaki Sakshat, Shri Sahasrar Swamini Moksha Pradayani Mataji, Shri Nirmala Devi Namo Namo. Shri Radha Krishna. Om Tvameva Sakshat, Shri Radha Krishna Sakshat, Shri Adi Shakti Mataji, Shri Nirmala Devi Namo Namo. Shri Vishnu Maya Viratangana. Om Tvameva Sakshat, Shri Vishnu Maya Viratangana Sakshat, Shri Adi Shakti Mataji, Shri Nirmala Devi Namo Namo. Shri Vittal Rukmini. Om Tvameva Sakshat, Shri Vittal Rukmini Sakshat, Shri Adi Shakti Mataji, Shri Nirmala Devi Namo Namo. Shri Yeshoda. Om Tvameva Sakshat, Shri Yeshoda Sakshat, Shri Adi Shakti Mataji, Shri Nirmala Devi Namo Namo. Bolo Shri Bhagwati, Shri Mataji, Shri Nirmala Devi Ki Jai. Now you take your bandhan and raise your kundalini, please.
Thank you, dear Patrick. Jai Shri Mataji. So now we can begin our conversations over a cup of chai. So Mohan, you can take it from here, and we invite Patrick, Felicity, Mark, and Edward to share their recollections with Shri Mataji and specifically how Sahaja Yoga started in 1981. It's a very interesting story that Richard tells, and Patrick, I know you've almost created that into a play. So we're looking forward to see which you of us are going to turn that into a play and show it to all of us. It's so very interesting. So if you want to share that, that would be awesome. Jai Shri Mataji.
Sure. It's aiming to be something, and it's just the beginning. That's just the first act of that play. Or actually, my daughter thought should turn it into a graphic novel, but I don't know whether that's going to happen either. Like that, but something we can do with it, I'm sure. I mean, there's more scenes after that, right? That we can.
This is going to be a play about the early days of how Sahaja Yoga got started. What is the actual?
Well, yeah, there's a piece I just put up on, a couple of months ago. It's a piece that Richard actually wrote, and it talks about us, our beginning in Sahaja Yoga. I mean, the actual beginning is Shri Mataji coming to Vancouver on October the 9th, and giving a couple of interviews there, and then doing a program. And some of this has fortunately ended up in Amrita, so you can see the program, and you can see the radio interview that she does. And but for us, none of us was actually at that program, right?
This was in 1981, right? So just let's
yes, that's the interesting thing. That's the amazing thing. None of these yogis who started Sahaja Yoga in Vancouver were actually at that first program in Vancouver in October 1981. They all came afterwards. So yeah, you can also tell the story of Barbara and how you all rented. I think so it was Mark and Richard who rented the house first. It's such an interesting story.
The collective unconscious is working through Richard and Mark. In 1981, we decided we would start an ashram, but we called it a collective house. But it turned out to be the first ashram. So we decided we're going to rent a house, and we're going to find some other people to live with us and have a shared house. So we found a house, and then we found Patrick, and then Patrick found Barbara. And by the end of 1981, there were the four of us. And one by one, we got our self-realization. Patrick was the first. Then there was a lady who was coming from White Rock, who has passed away since, called Lori. And then there was Richard, and then there was me. And so there we were, even before we all got our realization, we were having a blast. We're living as like a family, go on day trips together, walk over to the nearest little cafe bar and play foosball and have cappuccinos, and mostly really enjoyed living together. And all the time, Shri Mataji is working her play so that finally in early January 1982, all the four of us, Patrick, Richard, Mark, and Lori, we go to India and we meet Shri Mataji. But we have all these interesting stories of what happened in 1981 from Patrick. And actually, Patrick was the one who stood behind me in December and did the formal, now you are self-realized moment with me. And do you feel that? And I said, no, I don't feel anything.
Amazing. I know. I remember those days when you first get your realization and you think, well, Is it the fan? You know, is it the
No.
air conditioning?
But there's a story that Richard tells, which is he and I were in the middle of the city of Vancouver talking about, what about Patrick? And then at that moment, Patrick happens to appear in the city of Vancouver, like basically 500,000 people in the downtown area. And there's Patrick. So Shrimataji was just relentless in her sending big, broad hints of who those first four were going to be. And Patrick can talk about meeting Barbara, and then anything else you want to say, Patrick?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know, I've lost the video, but so I can't tell. Yeah, I was sitting in the ashram, well, what was to become the ashram, 1 or 2 days after I had moved in. And we still had the ad in the paper because the house required 4 or 5 people to be viable. And this woman came to the door, and the way the door was, that people standing facing the door, we could see them side on from the front room, you see, so you could see somebody before you open the door. And I was somehow very struck right at the beginning of something about, I mean, the woman seemed to me beautiful, but not in any sort of any way that implied, you know, sort of romantic or sexual or anything like that. It was just actually beautiful, you see. And I mean, that was my very first sight of her. And then I invited her to, and then we sat down on the table and talked. And all the time I'm struck by how different she looks, you see. And we're talking about a lot of things. We went into sort of very deep conversation right at the beginning, talking about things sort of spiritual and that. And I was struck that she seemed to know more about what she was talking about than I did. And that wasn't a very common experience for me, that I would think that. And I just felt that she was clearer on things, you see. So eventually she left, and I phoned up Richard and said, you know, you got to talk to her, because I think there's something really about her, you know. I think this is somebody we want. And I think that she originally decided not to move in, but then wherever else she was going to go, it turned out to be a little bit odd. And then she opted for us. And she had been sent by Shri Mataji to do the follow-up on the program. Shri Mataji actually says this in the public program on the 9th. She says, right at the beginning, she says, we're not going to be able to do follow-up now, but I'll send someone from abroad to come and do the follow-ups. And so she had a list of 20 or 30 names of people that had said that they wanted to do follow-up for the Saj Yoga. And she was contacting these people, and we were going around and arranging a hall and doing various things. And I was helping her, not that I knew much about Vancouver because I was new to it, but I just had the time. I was between jobs, and on the last day, the day of the program, I asked her if it was all right if I came to the program, because I was sort of under the impression it was only for people that had been to Shri Mataji's program. And she said, fine, you know. And so the program happened, and it was quite a large turnout. I mean, more than she'd been expecting. It was 30 or 40 people, you see. And at that time, and for a few years after this, when we gave realization, we gave each person realization individually. Saj Yogi would go and stand behind the person that would, each individual, and raise their kundalini and bandhan them and check their vibrations, you see. So she's faced with 40 people and there's just her. And she said, I can't do this by myself. You have to help me. And I said, well, fine. But the odd thing about this that I didn't quite realize at the time, but I realized afterwards, was I hadn't actually officially got my realization. But here I was giving other people their realization, and I didn't really expect it to work. I'd been to different programs. I mean, these programs were all over the place. They probably still are. Somebody comes and, some friend or something says, oh, come along and see this, you see. And I'd been to a few, and I was very skeptical. And I never felt anything or had any experience at any of them. And I thought, well, this is what's going to happen here, you see. So I said, what do you want me to do? And she said, well, you feel the person, you feel their chakras. And of course, we had the chakra chart with the color coded, on the hand and on the chakras, which is very useful. And so she said, and then when you bandhan them or you clear them, you see. So I did this, what I was told. I mean, say somebody's catching right heart, and I'm surprisingly feeling something on my right heart. And then I'm bandhaning it, and I'm surprisingly feeling it clear. And you could see, in some cases, the kundalini throbbing on the spine and moving up the spine or moving from chakra to chakra. It was quite stunning. It was quite amazing.
Wow.
Especially since, like I said, I'd never had any sort of extrasensory experience before this, you see. And then that eventually we managed to give everybody their realization, and we went back to the ashram, or to the house. It's not yet an ashram, but it's already halfway there, anyways. And she gave me a picture of Shri Mataji, and it wasn't the standard picture like Edward was just showing on it. It was a picture of what I call a Mother Mary picture, because I had been raised a Roman Catholic, right? And Mary always is in blue and rose. The colors of her clothes are always in blue and rose. Very common, you see. And that's what this picture of Shri Mataji was, you see. And I sat down in front of the picture to meditate. And almost immediately, I realized that this was Mary. This is Mary. And I'd been praying to Mary all my life. I'd stopped going to church. I wouldn't consider myself a Catholic, but I still, in times of difficulty, I prayed to Mary. And I realized that Shri Mataji was Mary. And not only that, and probably more important than that I had a connection with her, not just a mental sort of projection, a connection. I could feel her and she could hear me. That's what I felt very strongly. And I never afterwards ever had any doubt on that point. And I never had any doubt on Shri Mataji. And that made everything going forward much easier. than some people face. And I wrote to Shri Mataji the next day and said, well, you know, whatever you want me to do, I'll do. Because from the time I was like 13 or 14, there was a general buzz around, sort of an underground buzz around Canada, that something big was going to happen, was going to change. We were going to change the society. And there were novels and that spoke to this, and they weren't sort of best-selling list novels, but they got passed around among people. And I really believe that was going to happen. I didn't have it all right. I thought it wouldn't involve a guru. But I did have some understanding of what was supposed to happen. And some of that actually came because I read my Marx carefully. And Marx was used the ideas of the philosopher Immanuel Kant. And Kant talked about the difference between quantitative change and qualitative change. And the traditional metaphor for that is, say, cooling water. If you cool water, it gets colder and colder, but at some point it turns into ice. With getting colder and colder, that's a quantitative change, but changing into ice, that's a qualitative change, you see. So something like this was going to happen to human beings, because clearly Marxism hadn't done what it said it was going to do, right? They thought they were going to establish a class, you know, sort of a whole new altruistic society, and it didn't happen, you see. So something had to happen. And it struck me that this is what had happened to me, that I was now on a completely different level. And because I'd been looking for that, I hadn't been looking for a guru, I hadn't been looking for a spiritual movement, but I had understood by this point that it wasn't going to be political or psychological or social, it was going to be spiritual. And then I just sort of, I mean, it's like I just walked into it, and everything changed in that few days, I think. So like I say, I was very fortunate. It was always clear to me. And
You were
No, I
seeking
think
for a
Uncle
long
Edward, you had
time.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Auntie Rena, go ahead, please.
Yes, so you were obviously seeking for such a long time, like so many of us. We were seeking and seeking and seeking, and then fervently seeking, and then suddenly, you know, like even for me, I knew that I had read somewhere that when you're ready, a book will appear, and when you're really ready, a guru will appear. So luckily for me, that did happen as well. So when that happened, of course, the first day I didn't feel much, but in the follow-up program, I just knew deep inside, like a voice, my own voice or a voice within me said, whatever you were looking for forever and ever and ever, this is it. So from that day forward, you know, coming like within a week of coming to Saj Yoga, I knew that this is what I was looking for forever and ever. And there was absolutely no doubt in my mind. So similar, you know, as you were saying, Shri Mataji, whatever you would have me do, you know, that's what I'm here for. It's so good for the seeking to be over, and then you can just go ahead and dig deeper, so to speak, instead of keep on looking for new wells to dig. Nice. Wow, it's such a beautiful story. So then after you all went to India. So Lori and you and Mark and Ed was not there yet. So Richard, the four of you went to India, and then Richard got married that year, right? So that was like January, if 1981, 82, January 82. So
February.
Shrimati
First,
came in October
first the four of
1981
us.
and then,
First, the four of us went to England,
Yes.
and that's where we met
Go
Felicity. And then the four of us, first we went to England, and the four of us met Felicity in London. And then the four of us went to India, where we arrived in Mumbai. And one by one, we went up on a stage at the end of a public program and introduced ourselves to Shri Mataji. So when I went up on the stage, I was at Shri Mataji's left foot, and Patrick was at her right foot. And we rested our hands on the floor of the stage with our palms up. And Shri Mataji lifted up her left foot and placed it on my two palms. And she said, sometimes it takes a long time. And then sitting next to her on the stage and watching her with other people, I had this knowing inside me. And it was not quite as clear as Patrick's knowing, but somehow I knew that whatever she asked me to do, I would just do it. And it was just my beginning of then spending 3 months in the company of Shri Mataji in India and in England.
Wow. Cool.
so when you went to England, Mark, initially, so was Richard engaged already at that time, or he was not matched when you went to UK first?
Remember, we were just a few
So
weeks.
from Canada, you went.
We were just a few weeks in Sahaja Yoga. Richard was a little over a month in
Ah.
Sahaja Yoga. And so it was a strange journey where the flight took us to London. We got on the magic bus, went to Paris, and then we took another plane from Paris to Bombay.
Wow.
But if you want to know about the marriage, Felicity, you
Yes.
tell them about the how the
Felicity.
marriage was done. This is unique. I mean, this is the only time Shrimati did it this way.
So we actually, it was February. The actual marriages took place the day before Shiva Puja. We got married on the 21st of February. And then the next morning, the next day was Shiva Puja. But what was, at that point, Shrimati had been having had been matching people herself. And we'd had collective marriages in England, quite a lot, like one with 17 couples, one, there was, started small and then it grew. And by November, there was a big collective marriage there. Also, she'd been to Australia and she had done collective marriages there. So on this tour, we were about 80. I remember Mark knows exactly. And there were apparently 27 people on the marriage list. So we put our names down and I put my name down. I just reached a point. I'd been in Sahaja Yoga 3 years and I suddenly felt it's time to go further. And I wanted someone to love and look after. And we were sitting with Shri Mataji, as was common in India or any time, at her feet. So the whole tour, the group were sitting around Shri Mataji, and she would just talk very casually, informally. Sometimes she would be talking about deeper things, but often it was very informal, casual talk. And then suddenly she said, now who's on the marriage list? She said, stand up. Everybody who's on the marriage list, stand up. So 27 yogis, yoginis stood up. And so everyone could see who they were. And then she said, okay, now sit down. And then she proceeded to ask each person individually to stand up, and she introduced them. And she talked about each person, and she hadn't met everybody personally at all, but she always said one really positive, good thing about the person. And if they had some weakness or negative defect, she also talked about that. Everything was very open. It was very like
It was
family.
very funny too, yeah. I remember there was one French fellow that didn't have any English. And Shri Mataji said about him, he has very good French. And she was teasing everybody too at the same time. And another thing she said that stood in my mind was she talked about, how you match people, you see. And one of the things she said was that there should be a similarity in height. And which is in itself funny because Shri Mataji is much shorter than her husband, right? CP is the same height as I am, and Shri Mataji is about the same height as Madhu is. You see, so and then after the same time that she matched me up at the same time, to Madhu. So she said things and always felt free to then. It was always in her hand. There were no absolute bonds on her. Go ahead. Tell them about the marriage, about writing down the names.
So as Patrick said, it was quite an informal and joyful event, I guess. And then after she had finished talking about everybody, and they all sat down, she said, okay, now I want you to go away and think about and put down 3 people on a list that you would like to marry. And I was like, what? This was absolutely not what I was expecting. I was so happy after I got realization, and through different experiences, I came to understand that Shrimataji was really the best person to pick for me, and everyone, but especially for me, because I understood that she understood everybody very deeply. And we as human beings, we just see the outside of a person until you get to know them. And even then, we can't know people as completely as she can. And she talked to us about how marriage was for spiritual growth, and that it was vibrational, that she matched people vibrationally so they would balance each other and help each other in their spiritual growth. And she'd had a lot of conversations and talks with us about the real meaning of Sahaj marriage and how important this was, that we should get married and have children. And if I might reflect back, because something happened that she spoke about that stuck with me so deeply for my life, and I think is very relevant still today, was we were sitting in her presence in a similar way in England before, like in the 80s, 1980, something like that, and before anyone in the collective had got married. And she suddenly, and at that time, she started to talk about how important it was for us as yogis to be married. And she actually said, if any one of you doesn't want to get married, you get out of Saj Yoga. We need them, and we need you to be married. And then she said to us, she said, you are the foundations on which we're building Saj Yoga, but I will send you the children, and it's the children who will change the world. And then she went on to say, and we will build a school, and you can send the children to the school, and they will be taken care of there. And so she so much imbibed us with this sense that Sahaj marriage was not just for us personally, it was part of her vision. It was part of her vision for the world, to establish and change the world. And gradually, as more countries became into Saj Yoga, the marriages started to become so much more international, multicultural. And you could see how with these marriages, she was breaking down all the conditionings, the prejudices of that we are brought up within our countries. And in one swoop, by matching people from different cultures, different countries, the children become like international children. They're not bound by so much by the conditionings of the country that they grow up in. So I understood that Sahaj marriage was a really special thing, a special event. And I was so shocked. I can't tell you, I didn't know what to do, because there weren't so many people. There were 27 people on the marriage, so 12 men like that. And I just thought, I can't choose. But, I have to put some names down because mother said this. And so I sort of briefly went round who was there. And I just went, oh, I suppose I'll put his name down. I suppose I put that name down. So I put down 3 names, but not Richard. I had a conversation with him and had felt we're totally opposite. He doesn't understand the way I talk or what I talk about. He's not interested, you know. So I completely didn't think about him in that category at all. And I put down these 3 names of these 3 gentlemen, mostly Australians. There were a lot of Australians on the tour. And I always had felt as a young person that I would marry someone from a different country, not England. So I put down, you know, I would marry whoever mother said, and I was willing to travel. And then we just submitted our pieces of paper and waited and left it at that. And then I think obviously they went to mother, and I think the next day it must have been, I can't remember. Richard remembers very much that Warren was going backwards and forwards between mother's house and the camp and talking with people and going away again and asking someone else, you know, is it okay? And eventually I actually got cold feet, and I felt like, oh, I'm not ready for this. No, I'm not grown enough. And I went to Warren and I said, I would like you to take me off the list. I don't want to do this. I don't think I'm ready. And he went, oh, well, actually, I think mother's got someone for you. You have a match already. And I went, oh, who is it? And he said, it's Richard. So again, I was like, Richard. So I forgot all my doubts and things. And I just said, because it was such a shock to me that it was Richard, I wanted to be sure that mother was happy with the match. And so I went back and I said, I just need to know, is Shrimataji happy with this match? And he said, yes, no, she's very happy with this match. It's a good match. And then I just surrendered and I said, okay, that's fine. And it was very sweet, because as soon as I surrendered, I started to see inside why this would be a good match. You know, we just like it is in Sahaja Yoga, you get these sort of little epiphanies, these light bulbs that go on your head. Oh, it's like that. Oh, it's going to be like this and that. And all the things that I felt mother sort of said inside me about my marriage and my match just came true. It was very beautiful. And I was very grateful to mother that I didn't actually, I didn't have to make a choice. It was, I think very much it was to pamper our egos for that particular occasion. And 12 couples got married, 6 of whom had already been married, but got remarried. And out of the other 6 couples, only Richard and I are still here, thanks to, I must say, you know, it takes 2 to make a marriage work, and you both have to make compromises and grow. And I remember at one point coming in Vancouver, coming home with him and seeing another couple biting the dust and going for divorce. And I just turned to him and I said, you know, we're so lucky, you and I, because we don't have divorce in our family. We have parents, we've seen how normal marriage is. You know, you have your ups and downs and you work through things, but it's very deep and you love each other and you just stick together. And I felt very grateful that mother gave me a husband my biggest desire was to have a husband who felt about Sahaja Yoga the way I did, because I couldn't imagine living with someone who was not a yogi or who didn't believe in God and love God the way I did. And that's what she gave me. And I'm very grateful. Thank you, Shrimataji. So that was the marriage bit anyway.
I wonder at this point, we could ask Pradnya Madhu to talk about, because her route into the marriages and our marriage was fixed at the same time, although we didn't get married till the next year. But her route into the marriages was a little bit different. And you tell her how, well, Shrimataji asked the Indian girls if any of them wanted to get married, right? Well, see. You have to get.
Different choice.
But first she asked them, is there anybody willing to get married? And even to say yes to that was quite a bit
Yeah.
daring, because most marriages are done within the caste, right?
Yeah, but my aunt, she want I should marry in Sahaja. She asked first to Shri Mataji. Shri Mataji asked her, is your is about me? Is she want to marry in Sahaja? Then Abhay's mother said, yes, we would like to marry in Sahaja. Then she directly asked me. I said, I don't mind to marry in Sahaja, but I had to ask my mother because she wasn't so much ready to this international marriage. She was worried because I'm only one daughter. But my aunt and my cousin brother Abhay, they want I should marry in Sahaja because it is different. It was new for me actually. I didn't know what is Sahaja Yoga at that time clearly. But I like to do worship and do puja. In traditional in India, we are doing that. And when we saw Shri Mataji, we thought she is God, goddess. And I like that time, her speech and her care. And she was talking with me. Are you ready to marry in Sahaja Yoga? So I said, but you had to talk to my mother. Then my aunt talked to my mother. She brought my mother in puja. Then Sri Mataji talked to my mother. My mother didn't say anything in that time because Sri Mataji, she can't say no in front of her. But she said, we are worried. Sri Mataji said, you don't have to worry. You should be ready to do marriage in Sahaja Yoga because in society that time so much problem for girls means daughter-in-law to marry in our caste. She said it will be safe for her in Sahaja Yoga. Then she said okay. Finally my mother was ready to do marriage. And my brother, I have four brothers. Then she also talked to them. Then everybody was ready. Because that time, Abhay introduced everything in about Sahaja Yoga.
Abhay's her cousin.
Yeah.
And he was one of the first Saj Yogis in Pune. He came in through Dumal. Do you remember Dumal from Rahuri?
Yeah.
Yes.
Dumal had a wada in Pune, and Abhay and his mother lived in that, in a couple of rooms in that wada. So he knew Dumal. And great story about him. Srimati came to his house and came into the house and had tea and sat on the bed. And after that, he wouldn't let anybody who came into the house sit on the bed. He said, no. So he was quite, but at the beginning, he was one of the really active people in Saj Yoga in Pune. He did a lot of programs. So he was sort of the powerhouse here at that time.
Well,
And when Shri Mataji eventually matched us, she asked Madhu if she was ready. She said yes. And then she said, do you know where Canada is? And she said, no. But she
I know
was a
in those days,
graduate.
Canada was like the land of igloos, right? Igloos.
Oh yeah, you get some
We thought
amazing
so.
questions. So I remember going into the doctor that delivered my first son, and he's saying, do you have a helicopter? And I'm thinking, why would I have a helicopter? But he'd seen some program on TV where in the north where people flew around in helicopters.
Wow.
Anyways,
Such beautiful stories. Thank you so much for sharing. And I mean, such a solid example for us and the new couples that are matched, or the future ones that will put their names forward for the Sahaj marriages. In Canada, we have, we just made a list, and we have 54 couples that were either matched and married from Canada, maybe living somewhere else like yourselves, or who were matched and married from another country and are now living in Canada. So we have 54, soon to be 55. One match is getting married either on the 8th or the 9th of October in India or in Nepal. So it's quite an amazing list of very solid yogis, and we thank you all for that. And we thank Shri Mataji for, you know, bringing people together from different countries, different castes, different religions, different classes, and just creating a very, very beautiful society of realized souls, and for realized souls to be born, as Felicity was sharing. So thank you so much. So then after that is when Mark and Linda got married, right?
Oh,
So
well,
that's the story that we want to hear.
let's move back
Mark.
to 82. And, you know, yogi number 5 is Edward Sogstad. So eventually we all came back from India tour in England, and we were back in Vancouver. And then we were having programs. That's what you did. You were like a few weeks old in Saj Yoga, you gave programs. And so then to one of these programs, how did you get to that program, Edward? And what did you feel that first program?
Ron, my friend Ron came to that program. I can show you a picture of him if you like. Where's Ron? Here he is.
And then we can move forward to December 1990 if we want.
There's Ron. He's not there anymore, but he was a friend of mine out in the suburbs. So he came to a program, had a great experience. I don't even know why. Oops. I don't know why you guys did a program out in those suburbs, but he was the only one that he just had a fantastic experience, and he felt his Kundalini all night, and he didn't know who to tell, so he came to me. And at that time, I was living here in North Delta.
We can't see your screen, Uncle Ed, if you're sharing anything.
Okay, wait.
Okay.
How do
I can see you.
Oh, can you? Okay.
Yeah, I can see him. I don't know.
I can see Edward, but if Edward, you're sharing something, then we can't
Oh,
see
I
that. But
see. Yeah,
I can
yeah.
see Edward.
like this?
That's not. We can see. Yes.
That's it. Now we can see it. Yeah.
Okay, so here's Ron.
Doesn't look much like Ron though.
Here's Ron up at the top there.
Ah, yeah, there he is. Yeah.
Wow.
Laurie, Mark, me. There's some other couple of yogis from
Gabriel,
England.
it's Gail from England, whose brother in the back there between Ed and Ron is Gail, whose husband's brother organized Mother's program, first program in Vancouver for Shri. So she was visiting, I guess looks like 83, I think.
September 83, yeah.
So,
So Ron
Felicity,
found
is
me out
that
here.
Graham Pottinger's sister? Graham Pottinger's
Yes.
sister?
No, that's
Oh, and
Graham
what's-
Pottinger's wife. So Graham Pottinger
Oh, his wife.
and his
Okay,
wife
okay.
Gail, and it was Graham Pottinger's brother. So we were we were in England when Mother was talking in the fall of 81. I want to go to Canada. Who do we know? How can we do this? And then Graham said, I have a brother there in Vancouver. And she said, okay, you contact him and you get him. And he did all the advertising. He rented the hall. And then mother. So
He did this, huh? He did all that also.
And Graham's brother, actually, he was not a yogi, right?
no, he wasn't a yogi at all. I don't think he
Amazing.
never became a yogi. But you know, Shrimataji has her amazing ways. She said once, you know, she would use whoever she could, whoever was willing and would come her way. So anyway, yes.
So
Sorry.
he
for
organized
that
he
rejection.
organized I think he organized the 81 program and the 83 program, didn't he? Graham's brother. So anyway, yeah, so I was out here in the countryside and Ron came to me and he said, hey, I just discovered this amazing thing, you know, and I didn't really believe him, but he came back and picked me up and took me to the ashram. And we had the meditation there. That was 20th of April, 1982 on a Tuesday evening. And I didn't really have, I had just felt a lot of pain. And Patrick told me, asked me if I had pain on my forehead. I said, yeah. He said, that's your Ekadesha Rudras, because I've been doing a transcendental meditation for 8 years and heavy drugs for 10 years. So when I went home to my little shack there beside the railroad tracks, I had no idea, you know, what is this? And so there's this ancient Chinese oracle called the I Ching. And somehow my mom bought it for me a few months before, and I discovered that it really works. You can ask it questions. And so, of course, I got home that evening, opened the I Ching, asked about Shri Mataji, and it said the most fantastic things. And I'd been seeking for 8 years, and suddenly this thing says, you know, Shri Mataji and Sahaja Yoga is the highest. So instead of doing my TM the next morning, I just held my hands out to a paper black and white photograph of Shri Mataji for 20 minutes, checking the time, and then I put it away. And within 2 weeks, I completely stopped doing drugs. And a short time later, I moved away to one of the islands on the coast. And yeah, I just sort of woke up after a lifetime of sleeping. And I just wanted to show this picture here. Where is it? Okay, wait. Okay, anyway, this was just going back to 81. There's an aerial photograph of in 1982 of the house there. As you can see below it, it's looking exactly, I mean, the playing field is the same. And that's the house still standing there.
That's the ashram.
Yeah, so that was and this is the second, this is the ashram that I went to, the second one. That's how it looked back in the old days. And there underneath, you can see it's still there. And here it is at the bottom. It's funny because they're both blue now. They look really similar. And yeah, so there's this famous picture everybody knows now. So yeah, so these are the two locations. One was up here in the end of 81, and the other one was then down there for, I don't know, a couple of years, or a year, I guess it was, or no longer, end of 82, yeah.
Yeah.
So
You should just say it in case people are watching who haven't seen the photo, who the people are in the photo.
I saw in the photo, yeah.
Yeah, but
Yes.
that it
we call the two photos, the one with Lori and the one with Barbara,
Yes.
Fab 4. So just so you know.
So this one has Richard, and then in the hat, and Patrick in the glasses, and Barbara from Australia, and Mark in the bottom corner.
Barbara's got to be sitting down because she was as tall as Richard and I.
Really?
Yeah.
She was,
Really?
Yeah, you can't tell there.
anyway,
And then there we have Lori and
Yeah.
Mark again, and me and Ron. And there's a couple.
and
other
that's
people.
Laurie's daughter below Ron, but
Yeah.
Laurie's other daughter, who's not in the picture, Lisa, she must be mentioned too as being very fundamental in. She was 12 when Laurie came into Sahaja Yoga, and she was always there and part of the ashram, and she was born realized, and she was very much part of the collective, and she lives now in Australia with her husband and children.
Yeah, actually, I was the seventh yogi because there was already 6, including Lisa and Ron. So when I showed up, I was technically the 7th one. And I made a picture here of when I left Vancouver a few years later to go to Austria. We were living in this place up in North Vancouver, West Vancouver. And then I made a map just showing where these locations are. So that's the last place where I lived. That was the 5th ashram up the top there. And
Mother
the
had
other
a
two.
city. We moved every 2 years or every year. For whatever reason, we had to change ashrams, and she had us living in so many houses all over the city. So it was really a way you could feel of vibrating, that this is how she vibrated the city, by moving us around to different locations.
Did Shri Mataji visit any of these houses?
Mataji
Yes.
didn't. Yeah, she came to the one in Wood Green Drive, which was just further up
Vancouver.
here.
Yeah, and many of them. She came to the one that was down in Ambleside. I don't think she visited
Yeah, that
the
was
Palm.
later.
Yeah, not so much later, but yeah, no, she did.
Yeah, the third one up on the mountainside, also up on the mountainside up here.
Lions Bay, that was an amazing visit. Yeah.
Wood Green Drive was in 83, where she stayed with us. Even my mom came to the ashram and met her there. And my dad came to the program. There was this amazing underground hall for programs, where she had so many programs there in Vancouver. And my dad got
Robson Square.
there. Yeah, Robson Square, yeah.
Square in Vancouver. Yeah, it's a big art center.
You can see here
She was so open. She was so open, at that ashram you had in 83, there was that public program she came for. And I can't remember if she went to Victoria, but she invited this whole group of people who'd come from Victoria to the public program, got their realization, and then you organized a puja the next day. And she invited.
Actually, she invited everyone from the program.
Yeah, everybody.
Whoever
came
wanted to come. Yeah, 50 people came and had puja.
She did that in Toronto too. Yeah.
You don't remember. I mean, it was so open in those days, and it was very important to Shri Mataji that people became immersed very quickly in the vibrations and in the experience of Sahaja Yoga. So in India, I got realization, and within 2 weeks, there was a birthday puja, and I was there, and Shri Mataji would just say, "Oh yes, tell them to come, And when we would have pujas in those early years, she would always ask, is there anyone here who hasn't done puja before? So people who just got realization a few months before, a few weeks, she would always have them come up and wash her feet at that point in the puja where you were washing feet, and she would invite these people to come up. So it was good to remember, how open Mother was with that, and just because it was important to her that people actually could feel the experience, that it would go deep within them.
Yeah. In 1983, she did the program at Robson Square, and she invited everybody for lunch at the ashram to come the next day. I think it was the next day. And so I have a photograph of Shri Mataji in the kitchen cooking the lunch for all the people. And then there was a smattering of new people that joined the yogis for the puja. And Shri Mataji explained to the new people how to do pranam. She said, I'd like you to bend forward so that I can see your kundalinis.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That was great. It was
She cooked chana.
We have to bear in mind that we only saw Shri Mataji in Vancouver. The yogis saw her there only once before 1989. In those 9 years, we only saw her there one time. So in other parts of the world, England and Europe and India, people were seeing Shri Mataji often. And we were so far geographically away that it was really a remote outpost. And so it was, I don't know, when I look back, it was a real struggle. I mean, anyway, for everybody, it was a struggle. But
that's
being
exactly
so far from everyone.
An outpost, because there was no internet, nothing like that. The phone was really expensive. And if occasionally somebody would come to visit, from Europe, and you were so thirsty, tell us what's happening, but we would get the talks, we would get the puja talks, and we would get videos of that. So it was a big thing in those days to transcribe. Everything came from Europe on a different format. And unless it was a cassette audio recording, it had to be reformatted. So everything would be like 3 weeks later or a month later, or it was incredible. Yeah, you felt like you were in an outpost.
Yeah, it was definitely like that. And the struggle was like that also. It was like in the Wild West frontier. And
but sorry.
For me, I don't know if I guess not many people realize this, but I've always felt that Felicity was like the grandmother of Saj Yoga Canada, because she had already been with Shri Mataji a few years, and suddenly she was there immediately from the beginning, and she was getting, you know, talking on the phone and getting the tapes coming, and we're getting the latest news. Like Shri Mataji said this week, on Thursdays we should stay up all night for our Guru Tattva, you know. So all these things we're doing live, you know, sort of live. So we get the news through Felicity, and so it was. Yeah, it was. I always remember this. It was such a cozy little group, and but we all had negativities also. You know, we were there, sort of working it out on our own in a way. There wasn't Shri Mataji, you know, there to ask the next day or the next week.
No, but what I discovered was that so I did get to go back to England every so often, and then I discovered that the challenges, the growth things that we were experiencing in our collective was exactly what was happening in the other collectives, and I realized, even though we were so far away, we were completely connected, and that everything Mother was working out in Europe, she was working out in the same way with us, and we were all just going through the same things and growing together. So that was a very reassuring, you know, revelation that, you know, there wasn't something just odd about our collective, or that, you know, why we were experiencing these things. This was normal growth and evolution to go deeper inside yoga.
Yeah, it was nice having this connection directly to England, like being plugged into England, you know, because we were so far away. But
then you got married and you connected us to Austria too.
Yeah, that came a long time later. I mean,
and Mark as well.
My first 4 years were there, and I was, you know, struggling most of the time. I was really caught up. After 9 months, I saw Shri Mataji in India, and I couldn't even go in front of her because I was shaking. The boots were so panicking, you know. And but somehow she got me through that first India tour with just a little runny nose. I didn't. On the way back in England, I was just almost dying, you know, clearing out. But
I think it helps people to understand that Mother was working the world out through us, and she made that very clear. You know, she said in England, each one of you yogis, and this applies to today, she said, each one of you is working out for 10,000 people. And when we had somebody came, I remember when Krishna came from Poland in England, and Mother said, at last we can work out Poland. You know, she was the first yogini to come from Poland. So in the same way, all of us in those early years, it's like we were all carrying the, in our chakras, our upbringings, our cultural conditionings, our own experiences, and it's like we could see how Mother was working through the levels, you know, clearing. It was hard not to feel everything was very personal, but it helped me when I remembered what Mother said, and I thought, okay, what I'm going through, you know, Mother's clearing me, and it's helping other people in the same situation to be cleared. So I think always we had this, she inspired us and filled us with this universal, you know, the importance of our small lives on the bigger, grander spiritual scale, you know. So many of the things that we went through then, I think it's hard for people to comprehend nowadays, because it's such a different life and it's very beautiful. But still, some people come from very difficult backgrounds, and you know, it gives us, we have compassion because we understand, you know, it's a stepping stone. And Shri Mataji to say, she used to use me as an example. She would say, look at Felicity, look how she's come up. If she can do it, you can do it. You know?
Yeah, that's what I tell people also in Kabbalah. I said, you know, really, I had written my story down and it's such a mess. I don't even know how I made it. But if I can make it, you can definitely.
That's it. And that the point of the story is that that's the power of Saj Yoga. That's the power that Mother has given us, the Kundalini, the vibrations, that when you have that love and you surrender, you know who she is, Mother can fix everything, you know, and she has done.
Before I forget, these aerial photos, I just put them as a post on my blog, edwardsaugstedt.com. so you can go see them there. But yeah, I went to India then after 9 months, which was weird because everybody had left except me and Ron. And Ron went back to North Delta, and I was trying to sell my truck, and I booked the flight. You can put a down payment, $50 in those days. And 3 days before the flight, a month later, somebody came by and saw my ad and bought my truck. And the next day, my mom phoned me out of the blue and said, "You still need some money for your trip, Ed?" And I said, "Yes." I flew alone to India with this heavy suitcase with unnecessary stuff and arrived 2 a.m. in Bombay in the humidity, and nobody was there to meet me, and I had no idea where to go, and some policemen helped me. And so I saw Shri Mataji for the first time in I was at that time called Bombay. The next day, Malcolm and Abdul's sister, Meenakshi, I think is her name. Yeah, they had a single marriage led by Shri Mataji because he had to go home to work. So I was sitting at the back of this hall, and I could see Shri Mataji at the front. And there was a single marriage going on, especially for them. And,
I was there for that too, yeah.
Yeah, it was just like, I had no idea what was going on. But apparently I sat at the back of the hall with Shri Mataji's brother, because I was talking to some Indian man, and then at the end he said, "I am Shri Mataji's brother." You know, so I was like, I felt like I was in a dream, you know. I didn't know how to respond or anything. But yeah, that India tour was amazing because we got to know, you know, so many Indians of the old, you know, the old days, everything was so small, you know. And so that was good. And a lot of the English, you got to go to know the English. So arriving back in Vancouver, it was, you know, you felt like you were part of the international collective. And then anyway, Shri Mataji arrived a few months later, and everything was full on, you know. And I think just before she arrived, I got my first full-time job that I had ever had. And Laurie was very happy about that. And I was like one of the that was before the Yuva time. There's no such thing as Yuvas then, but I guess somehow Mark and I were the Yuvas, and so sort of immature and struggling along. And yeah, things went along, and there was a lot of bumpy things, but I think like I'm finding now that I've really, last year I had a sort of a reset year. So it took me literally 39 years to clear out all my childhood trauma and the things I went through in my youth. And finally, I feel like in a way I'm beginning Saj Yoga because I could, just a couple of years ago, I started meditating properly for the first time. I couldn't go into my traumatized body because it had so much tension and fear from my childhood. And then I got really sick a few years ago, and through this illness, I had to face things. And that's when I discovered I had this tension inside me. So I had to consciously try to release it. And yeah, it took a few years. And then I realized that I could go inside, you know, the union, the yoga is inside your instrument. I could go inside my instrument and feel this huge, beautiful, like a landscape. And it was so quiet and beautiful inside me. And so literally when I say to people, you know, if I can make it, you can make it. Because it took me ages just to get through everything. But like Felicity said, because I always wondered, you know, is it something collective you're working, or is it just karma, you have a really horrible time? Or the third thing is God gives us complete freedom so we can do whatever we want with our ego, but she uses fear and pain to pull us to the other side, you know, like to get balance. And in my life, I felt that I just presumed that I needed a lot of pain and fear, the pain of fear to come down and just face things and, you know, try harder, basically. But
also, Shri Mataji said to us in England, she said, when the seekers are born, she said, they're marked. Like there's a mark on them that these are the seekers, these are the children of God. And she said, so the angels know who they are, but also the negativity knows who they are. And she said the deep seekers get attacked a lot in their families, you know, because the negativity is trying to pull them away. So I think it's, you know, it's not just us, it's also the situation and circumstances that we have to deal with.
I guess if you're also a foundation in a building, foundation stone in a building, then it's sort of a muddy, dirty thing where you're stuck in there. So you can't expect to be floating on clouds.
But yeah, but you know, when you know, after 40 years in Canada, what an incredible achievement. And you look back and you see that those foundation stones, and that's why, you know, Shrimataji gave us so much attention and so much love to embed within us, you know, who she was and who we could be and who she saw within us. And it's that strength that maintained you and nourished you through all the difficult times. You always had that sense of hope and that things will get better, things will improve. And she's, you know, she so much gave us this vision of what the world was going to be and promised us so many things. You know, you will get married, you will have children, and the children will, you know, be born realized, and so all these things. And I look back now to 40 years ago, you know, it feels like we've lived many lifetimes in this one lifetime. And so much has changed in the world. It's like Ed said before, it was an outpost in Vancouver. And now we're part of this global world, global community. And it's so many more things will still grow and change for us.
I was in a map store about 15 years ago. And, you know, the typical from the moon, the photograph they made of the Earth, 1969, I saw that hanging there. And then I saw a compilation of satellite photos of more recently, and just the contrast with the vibrations. Before 1970, it felt like a prison, like a dark prison where people were living. And then in the 1990s, from the satellite photos, it felt like, I don't know, like a kindergarten or a spring garden of flowers. And I guess when they took the images, Sri Mataji was there in various positions on the planet, you know. But it was the contrast was like just something that was frozen and dark and closed to something that was just, and I always have that image when I think of the Param Chaitanya filling up the planet, and how Sri Mataji said that Sri Sadashiva won't destroy the planet now because it's too much, the Param Chaitanya is too much established now. The Sahaja Yoga is established now. And I mean, I don't know as far as individuals who exactly is going to be there at the end, you know. I hope I will, but yeah, the planet's going to be saved, and you know, this Garden of Eden that I imagine is going to come up. And yeah, so like you said, Felicity, it's you have these things implanted in you that, yeah, it's going to work out.
It's so interesting because I'll give you a child's perspective, because I was very young when I started Sahaja Yoga, like 8 years old, and then we were on the other side, East Coast, and we had heard about a lot of yogis on the West Coast, but you know, like you said, there's large distance. It was like really expensive to support each other, and when I was listening to like the stories that you guys were telling, one of the things, well, first thing is I'll say, I remember whenever I go around traveling with people, do you know Patrick from Canada? I was like, no, I never met him. I think this is the first time I'm meeting Uncle Patrick. So it's kind of, it's kind of cool because like it's 38 years later, it's like, wow, finally seeing you. But when Sahaja started, like for me, I mean, remember like the thread that I'm hearing over and over again, it's like she pulled us in, and how like all of the first families came into Sahaja Yoga, and even how my family came into Sahaja Yoga. She pulled us in, she marked us. She really, you know, like if you go back and look, you go, wow, how did that happen? And the constant that I'm hearing and was very true for myself was the recognition of Shrimataji and who she was so instantaneous. It was almost like you didn't even realize you had to consciously have that thought of who she was. You just, you know, she's God, and you just knew it. And it was so like predominant. And I think that's the anchor that's kept at least myself through all of these years and all of the things that we have to work out as her instruments. You know, I think that's the constant that kind of got through. And for us to be here where we are now, 40 years of Sahaja Yoga in Canada, is still in its infancy. It's still very much starting to kind of penetrate, but so much Mother's laid down already. I just want to share that, because listening to these stories, that's really, really inspiring.
Yeah. So we diverged from Mark. Mark was sharing also.
I just quickly wanted to pick up on Mohan's point, because island, and he was here. He lives in India. And I also wondered, the tours, I never met Patrick. So this year, finally, I began my investigation and I connected with Patrick, and I'm ever so grateful to have done that. And of course, connected with Richard and Felicity, whom of course I knew, and then Ed as well. So yes, later on, we also want to hear about the story of Patrick coming in 1983 to Toronto. Much, such deep sharing, beautiful trust.
You're breaking up, Auntie. We can't hear you.
They've lost you.
Yeah. I think she was inviting Uncle Mark to say something.
Okay. Hi. So, I mean, the other piece of the early history of Canada is that Shri Mataji decided she would start Canada in Vancouver. And then Patrick went to Toronto. And how did you end up in Toronto, Patrick?
Well, I was from Toronto, right? And so I asked Shri Mataji if I could go to Toronto and try to start up Saj Yoga there. And she said, okay. And so I was there for about more than a year, from I think September 1982, and she came to Toronto in October 1983. Can you hear me properly?
Yep.
Yep, all right. And I mean, I knew a lot of people in Toronto, and I told a lot of people about Saj Yoga, but nobody I knew personally came into Saj Yoga. And that surprised me because they were seekers, but somehow they couldn't get, there was something they couldn't get over. And I also did public programs. It's just like Vancouver. It was really easy to do public programs in these cities. You could go into any library and rent a room, and putting up posters wasn't a problem, and that sort of thing, you know. And some people would come out. But we really didn't, by the time Shri Mataji came in October 83, we were like 2.5 Saj Yogis, right? There was Michael Knight was there with me, and he'd been doing it for about a year. He was sincere and he stuck on. And just before Srimati came, there was a fellow living in the same house with me, a fellow named Paul Borg, and he suddenly became interested. And he said that he could act as Srimati's driver when she came. And then he decided his car wasn't good enough, and he went out and rented a fancier car to drive her around. And so there were 3 of us in the end. And then Srimati did, like you were talking about there in Vancouver. At the public program, she called all the Saj Yogis to the Puja. And it was a Sri Krishna Puja. It was also a Thanksgiving Puja. I mean, it was right on, dead on Thanksgiving. It happened. And it was incredible. I mean, I've been back, and that puja's on video, and the public programs are on video in the last year, so I've gone back and watched them, and it's astounding, really. And also like the public program in Vancouver in 81, she's very direct. She's not talking about anything except changing the world. She's not worried about, she doesn't say a great deal about, your health will improve or anything like that, And I think, I noticed that in this time of COVID, I mean, people have done a lot of internet programs and I'm listening to them. And they even tend to downplay Shri Mataji's photo. And like Mohan was saying, I mean, nothing works better than the photo, in my opinion. Yeah. It's one of Shri Mataji's name is Achintya Rupa. And one of the things it means is that when you look at the photo, you go thoughtless. You can't think and actually put your attention on the photo,
Patrick,
And
I was going to mention that in the house that you were living in, you put a picture of Shri Mataji on the wall. I never talked with you very much about Sahaj Yoga or Shri Mataji, but I would talk to the picture. And somehow the connection was made that way. So that when that program happened and the puja happened, everything clicked. And that was it. I was a Sahaj Yogi that day. But it was
you're Roberta, right?
Yeah, it was the picture on the wall that that was the connection. You're putting the picture on the wall, and like a beautiful picture, and so we could talk. I could talk to her.
Yeah.
Where I couldn't talk with you because I don't know, I was off in some other thing.
We should give some context here. Roberta was in Vancouver in the ashram on Taylor Way in 1985. So quite early on. But you were in Toronto before that, Roberta?
In the same house as Patrick. Patrick moved into that house and I was wrapped up with all kinds of other stuff. So I didn't really listen to him, but the picture on the wall, I would talk with it. And then when the program was arranged for Shri Mataji to come, and then in the backyard of the house was the puja and havan. At the end of that, it clicked completely.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
I was not going to turn back. So I thank you, Patrick. It's so nice to see your face again. Thank you.
Yeah, it's nice to see you again. Roberta, well, one of the first things she did in Sahaj Yoga was to help me out tremendously. The people that were going around with Shri Mataji, one of them was this American guy, and he ran up a huge telephone bill in the house that I was then responsible for, right? It seemed like a lot of money to me at the time. I have no idea how much, I don't remember how much it was, but Roberta, who was by this time like a week in Sahaj Yoga or something, she stepped in and paid half the bill. And I thought it was one of the most generous things that's ever happened to me.
I have no memory of it. Memory's gone.
I don't know what this guy was up to, but like that.
Okay.
I want to say something here that's been on my mind that is a little bit off topic here, but now I've lived all my life either in Canada or in India, right? And where I live in India especially is a very spiritual place, because over the years, although it's not remote, it hasn't had any commercial importance. There wasn't enough rain for it to be a farming area or anything like, to consistently. And I think maybe it's only become relatively well populated in the last 100 years. But people did come and live here. And they came and lived in this area, I think, the same reason that they went to the much better known and higher Himalayas, right? Because you could sit there, you could meditate. And there were a lot of Swayambhus here. And there's a lot of, like, there's an amazing amount of it within a radius of us here of less than 20 kilometers. We have one of the major Ganeshas. We have the Samadhi of Sopan Dev, who was the only incarnation we know of Brahma Dev, right? Is only 20 kilometers away. We have, as I said, we have one of the Nas here. In another direction, I only learned this from going through Sri Mataji's tapes. We have Narasimha. So the boy that called upon Narasimha, he was born 20 kilometers away from Jeju and lived on the riverside there. And the river is called the Nira River. And he lived on the riverside. And Sri Mataji talks about that in a speech in Greece, right? And there's just all these places, you see. And I mean, even our temple here is extremely important. I think more important even than people realize, because Sri Mataji, when Madhu told her we were coming to live here, she said to Madhu, "I am there." And over time, I mean, it's an important sort of, it attracts a lot of pilgrims and that sort of thing. It's a big temple for festivals and things like that. But the really important thing seems to me that it's a place. I mean, when she said that, when I heard that, I didn't have a subtle enough understanding. But I mean, what she meant is that the Adi Shakti is there. So there's this place of the Adi Shakti here. You see, right in the middle. We're in the middle of the plateau, right? And on one end is the Ganesha, right? And I mean, there's so many things I can tell you. But so here we are, right? So we have this place that has all these vibrations, and people know it has the vibrations, and the saints have come and lived here over millennia, and the vibrations have gone deeper, you see. So it's all there. There's still a lot. I mean, it's not like it's all that's there. There's lots of superficiality in that, but it's there, you see. And then we look at Canada. And after writing this stuff I did about Toronto, in it I said to Shri Mataji, and I talk about saying to Shri Mataji that the Toronto Islands, the islands off the coast of Toronto that sort of form the harbor, that they were believed by the native people, what we used to call Indians, that they were believed to have healing properties. And I said that to Shri Mataji, and Shri Mataji said to us, yes, that's because this is Dwarka.
Wow.
And she said that the reason for Canada's vibrations was it was protected by the Great Lakes. That the Great Lakes act as a protection for some of the negativity from some that has affected America, right? So, and if you go out any place in Canada, there's all these places that have nice vibrations when you put your attention on them. But the difference between Canada and India seems to be that nobody's developed it. I mean, we have the Swayambhus here, but people sit and meditate on them and they develop. You see, the saints come and sit there, and the Swayambhus protect the saints, and the saints energize the Swayambhus at the same time. So I was reading afterwards the information that the Indians, the native peoples felt that the Toronto Islands had healing powers, comes from a diary from the first Governor General, the wife of the first Governor General of Ontario, what they called then Upper Canada. And she kept a diary. She was in the area for about 1.5 to 2 years. She lived in Quebec City. She lived in Niagara Falls. She spent some time in Detroit, and they came and established, they were trying to establish the capital there in, they want to call it York. Eventually it became Toronto. And she had some feeling for the place. And at the same time, it's a diary, right? You can read the diary. I looked it up it's on the internet. But at the same time, the feeling of the people coming to Canada from Europe was, how can we exploit it? I mean, I know people came for liberty, for religious freedom, and for this thing, but basically what everybody has settled down to in the New World is, how can they get advantage out of it, you see? And I think that's the main thing that the Saj Yogis have to change if they want it to really grow. They have to put something back into the land. I mean, I talked about this. I mean, it's somebody one day on the internet, and you take a river, right? All over the world, rivers are sacred, right? And there are rivers, and they're all named after river gods or goddesses, yes? What's the difference between the river goddess and the river? There's no difference. The river is the goddess, you see. You have to see the holiness of the place. And that's something that they've got still, that the traditional native populations have, that they saw the divinity in the land, right? And even in England, I mean, there are remnants of that. But what happened was, because they were all by this time sort of crazy Christians, when they came to Canada, they couldn't see the sacredness of these places. You see, they thought that everything was in the churches or things like that. And so people come and they just want to exploit. You want to get out of Canada, out of America, out of Australia, New Zealand, any of these places. You're supposed to make to become wealthy from it, you see. And I think that's that's why these places are not developing as well as they can. And I really think that that's what the Saj Yogis should be doing, is looking around wherever you are and seeing what's there. Where do you start? You know, I mean, in Vancouver, they have a great reverence for the Pacific Ocean and for the mountains. But do you meditate on the mountains? Do they see the holiness of the mountains, or the holiness of it? Because here they do. You see, here people know. I mean, to say that we have Swayambhus is almost to say that the whole mountain range that surrounds this plateau is just Swayambhus. You see, because people have this tremendous respect for it, you know? And I think I mean, you talk about conditioning. I think we have to get beyond our Christian conditionings, because Christianity saw a lot of these things as being pagan. and it suppressed them. And so there's a division in Western thought and the Western outlook between the material and the spiritual. But in the Eastern outlook, there's no division like that. You know, there's no separation. The material is spiritual. And anyways, that's what I want to say.
I'll just ask a question to you since you're talking about the Swambus, and I 100% agree that it's both ways. It works the way you described. Is there that mother talked to us to go to the Niagara Falls, that it's Shri Vishnu Maya, and then clear out the left shooting. When you were here, did you hear her say that or anything? Can you share with us about that?
No, I don't know that comment, the one about Niagara
She said a lot of yogis. Yeah. Oh.
I mean, I fully appreciate it. We used to, at the end of a party on Friday or Saturday night, we used to drive out to Niagara Falls, and you can drive from Toronto to Niagara Falls in almost no time, especially at night. And you can watch, you can see the dawn over Niagara Falls, and we weren't, it was something that had a spiritual side to it. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't know how clear-headed people were.
I just want to say that in 1990, when Shri Mataji did the Saraswati Puja in Vancouver, she said one of the reasons that she was doing that puja there was that Vancouver was one of the most beautiful places of nature in the whole world.
Wow. Nice.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
so
well,
good to hear.
it is, of course. I mean,
Yeah.
That picture is a whole story in itself. That whole weekend was just like one miracle happening after another. I think we'll have to have stages of different things. But Vancouver has the Swayambhu, the lions, the beautiful, they call in the native Indian language, the story, it's the two sisters. And Shri Mataji said that because of this Swayambhu, it protects Vancouver. And we could see that none of the false gurus really established themselves ever in Vancouver, whereas in Victoria, it was so hard to try to establish Saj Yoga there. We went so many times, public programs, yogis would sort of come and stick on. Sorry?
Somebody has the microphone on by mistake. If everyone can turn it off, that would be great. Thank you. Please continue, Felicity. It's a beautiful story.
Yes, so these two mountains face each other. So the English gave them the name of the lions because it reminded them of the stone lion statues in Trafalgar Square. But actually, the native Indian story it's of two sisters who perform very selfless, heroic acts of valor, and they were immortalized in these mountains as rock to inspire others in their not tribes, but of their people, to inspire them to be these more spiritual people. So it's a very beautiful native story behind it. And they sit overlooking this great Cleveland, which has now been dammed, but it's this gorge and this amazing lake which leads now into this dam. And it's a very beautiful spot. And it's interesting, Patrick, you saying that about worshipping, because I used to go sit there and you just feel this beautiful reverence and love for this nature, these mountains. And it really made sense when we heard Mother say, these mountains are protecting Vancouver. And you could feel that, you could see that. And I know a lot of yuvas, young people, have also gone and sat on the grassy banks that look up onto these mountains. It's amazing because they dominate the whole of the city. You can see from the city, you can see these mountains from so many angles, and on a clear day, you know, they're there. They're like this focal point that are in people's attention. So it's a very beautiful blessing that we have in Vancouver.
I used to have a connection to the ocean there. The ocean, which we know as the grandfather. Whenever I was alone and on my own, I would just go to the ocean. And it was really, I came back after 7 years and I saw the ocean. I felt like we just hugged each other like this. It was so powerful, you know, this massive, like a god, you know, there. And once you get the rapport with it, it's like, nothing like it, you know.
Yeah, I think it's everywhere it's important. In Canada, I think, and places like that, it's absolutely key, because I mean, what has Canada got? It's got this huge unconscious area that has to be brought into consciousness. I mean, all the taiga and all the tundra and all the lakes and all these places where people, the population is very small, right? And this is for the whole world. I mean, not just for Canada, right? But it's that's there, you see. And I mean, after all, I mean, if Canada is the place of Shri Vittal, then Canada is the Virat. See? And the Virat is what becomes enlightened. The heart comes up into the brain, and the whole Virat becomes enlightened. Right?
Yes, we have 10 million square kilometers, almost 10 million square kilometers. And of course, 3 oceans, the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Arctic.
Yeah.
So there's significant, significant space.
I
You need to meditate on it.
I think the nature is
yeah, I mean, connect with it, you know, not that it's just a meditation, but like Ed was saying, you need to connect with it, you know. I mean, one of the things I remember in Vancouver is coming out of the front step and looking up and seeing the mountain. I thought that was the most wonderful thing about Vancouver. That in the morning, as you walk out of the house, there's this great big mountain in front of you. You see, I thought that was tremendous, you know.
Yeah, I definitely.
Sorry, who's talking?
No, I was just going to say that actually one of the things somebody was asking, you know, did Mother say other things about Canada? And I heard her say that America will work out through Canada, and you feel that it sits on the top there with this balancing, protective vibration that spreads down. And having lived in other countries and coming back to England, you feel that generally speaking, a Canadian. So when we were coming to Canada, when we got married, and Shri Mataji asked us to come and see her before we left, and she said to us, at least she said, Canada is more like England than America. So it has more heart. It has more of the heart. And she said to us, go and be dynamic. Write to your leaders. She was she spoke very well and respectfully of Pierre Trudeau, who was Prime Minister at the time. And she told us that when he was having marital difficulties, that she had sent him a statue of Shiva and Parvati to help, you know, support or nourish their marriage. And she said, of course, I had to send it anonymously. I couldn't say who it was coming from. But she said to us, you know, you must write to these people. And I think, you know, what Patrick was saying too is that to some extent we've lost this sense of urgency in a way. In those early years, you really had a sense of dynamism and urgency, and where it's changed so much vibrationally. We're enjoying so much the change in vibrations, the depth that has come in, especially since the lockdown, this connection internationally around the world. It's just the vibrations in the Western world have just gone so much deeper. But still, you know, there we could have this dynamism within our hearts. And it's nice that you were saying about reminding us how Shri Mataji was so direct, and how she would just, you know, say exactly what this is, what it's all about, and not be wishy-washy in any way. So it's nice to feel that those memories and that dynamism inside one's heart, inspired by the nature. The nature in Canada is very raw. It's very wild nature, but it's very pure. It's like sort of primeval nature in a good way, and it's very strong in Canada. It's a huge, like, it feels like the whole thing is a Swayambhu in a way, you know. It's very
it is. It is in that position in the Virat.
There were a couple of pujas that the
Hi, Steve.
American,
Hi, Steve. Hey.
Hi, Steve. Steve Days.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Steve.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention Lions Bay, because Felicity brought that up, and I think we were on the same floor. We were living in the same ashram. Felicity and Richard were in the room next to us, yeah, Lions Bay in particular. You know, we used to paint houses, and the lions would be right above. Lions Bay was sort of behind the city, and you know, we always felt the mountains. We were gazing at the mountains all the time, it seems, up on high on these ladders and protected by the lions. But those two pujas, is Felicity mentioned the Saraswati Puja, which was really a Maha Saraswati Puja in the backyard of the Lions Bay ashram. And then later, I guess a year or two later, Abbotsford, Hamsa Puja. Those two particular pujas, yeah, they were international in a way that a lot of Americans came to them. And Shri Mataji did speak a lot about the connection between Canada and the US. But then in terms of the urgency, you're right. Almost every year there was a puja in which Shri Mataji would say, you know, something like, you know, it's urgent, or this is the year the bubble is going to burst or something. But I noted that if you go back and listen to the talk, Maha Saraswati, Saraswati talk, she talks about, you know, if you don't take up the responsibility and spread Sahaj, in this case, she was saying through the arts, but she said then, you know, Vishnu Maya will take over, burn the forest. And though, you know, there's an internal beauty of the collective that's grown in depth, and it makes us feel comfortable in a way, I'd say that the exterior world is certainly not comfortable. The entire West Coast was completely on fire, and still is, even more so than in those days. So I think the urgency is manifesting in the outside world in a lot of ways. Whereas, you know, this collective stronger for sure. I don't think Vancouverites feel like they're an outpost anymore, but you know, we certainly were, and you certainly felt this kind of urgency and importance as well, because there weren't too many of us either. So I think each one of us really, you know, did a lot, you know, postering and putting programs on. We were, each and every one of us were, you know, each and every one of us were responsible for a lot of things.
You literally, you gave up everything. You sacrificed. Nothing was more important than Sajoga, than the collective, than doing programs and things. Remind me, when did you get realization and come in, Steve? Because you were very early on too.
Yeah, later than you guys. It was like a second wave in 1987. I was Mark's roommate, Taylor Way. I think Edward were still around, but Edward was kind of leaving. Patrick had left. So I was like a second wave, and 87. So, you know, by the time I really kind of got into Sahaj, I moved into the ashram right away, but involved in a lot of the different things. That was when, you know, the pujas that Shri Mataji visited us for, a smaller one at Ambleside, at the house in Ambleside, which you mentioned, Shri Mataji, that we had like a small puja Mahakali Puja, I believe. And then the pujas got bigger every year, including the big one with the lightning storm and visitors from all over. In fact, it was dubbed an international puja because I think Phil Ward from Europe came. So we had one European, so we could call it an international puja.
No, I remember Mother saying it was an international puja. There also the French leader came as well. But it was international. And you were saying about, what was so amazing about the Hamsa Puja, which was in 1990 in Lions Bay?
The 1990 Saraswati?
Yeah, that was
Saraswati in Lions Bay.
So and so we had this ashram that was on the mountainside, literally on the mountainside, further out of the city, about like half an hour's drive. And the kitchen window was like, it was on the corner of the house, and there was windows on two sides, and you looked up what is called How Sound, which is like this fjord in a way. You look up this fjord which had mountains all around, and every morning you would get up, and it's like God had painted you a different picture. Every morning it looked different, and it was. And Mother came as Linda. It was Linda who was saying, and Mother came and she said, "This is the most beautiful ashram in the world," and it truly was. It was incredible. But that puja weekend, so I think it was the night before the puja, every time, whenever Shri Mataji came to Vancouver, in the beginning, she stayed in the ashrams, and we would just turn over a room. It would be completely dedicated to Shri Mataji, and it would have new there was always new bedding. So over the years, and Laurie was very instrumental in this, we gathered new beautiful things that only Shri Mataji used when she came to stay with us. And eventually, these were all stored. And so when Mother came, these things would come out, like her own hairbrush, her mirrors, her, beautiful things for the goddess, and the sheets and the pillows and all these things. So in Lions Bay, in a corner room above the kitchen, so with the same view looking out over the sound, Shri Mataji had her bedroom. And I don't know if you remember, Steve, if you were up there, but that night there was this incredible, the sunset, it turned this beautiful peach color, and the sky just turned this incredible deep peach and all kinds of pinks and rose colors with it, which we later discovered there was so many connections with the native Indians from that area. And there was a prophecy that when the sky turned that color, the mother would return, which we discovered later. And then as the sun set, this huge storm came up, but there was lightning strikes. It was a dry lightning storm, and the yogis who were in the room with Mother said she was like a conductor, a musical conductor. She was speaking, and she'd go, and yes, and ha, and then boom, down would go another lightning, and they said, Mother kept on talking, and this lightning was going, and the bulk of us were downstairs meditating in the meditation room. Shri Mataji was upstairs, and we were waiting for something, and all the lights went out, the power went out completely, so we all lit candles, so we're sitting in candlelight in the dark, with this incredibly loud lightning storm going on, and Shri Mataji upstairs. And then the next day, it published in the newspaper, it said 1600 lightning strikes had been recorded between Vancouver down to Seattle. And Shri Mataji said later it was Shri Vishnu Maya. It was her, I don't think it was her wrath, but she is the announcer. And she was announcing to Shri Krishna, who'd been sleeping. Shri Mataji said he's been sleeping. And she said, now it's time to wake up. She was waking up her brother to wake up in the Americas and take action. And
I just want to say, Felicity, I was there in the room with Shri Mataji that day. And it was so exciting, so loud. And also, so as it was happening, as you said, she was, sort of just conducting the whole thing. And then she said someone should go down and tell everyone that this is happening. So I got up and I ran downstairs, and I felt like, of course, Vishnu Maya is the announcement. So I was so honored that, I'm making this announcement to the yogis to tell them this is what's happening right now. So it was such a beautiful feeling.
I have to go now.
We have a photograph from the magazine that day of the lightning strike that they put in the paper. We have that. We'll share it.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's still a photo of that in the ashram. They have that too. Yeah. Do you have any other memories from?
I have to go now, but I just want to say how lovely it is to see these faces that I haven't seen for such a long time. So it was such a blessing being with you.
It's really
Nice
good
to see you, Roberta.
Really good to see you again.
Roberta, thank you so much for joining. So
And
happy
Roberta,
to
you
see
should share some of your memories too, because you were there in the mid 80s as well. I know.
Take care, everyone.
Jai Shri Mataji.
Jai Shri Mataji.
So please continue.
Well, one of the things, and maybe Linda, you might remember, but there was some report about the lightning actually dancing on the roof above Shri Mataji's room, and her that she said, "You see, she won't let me alone," you know. And I don't know if there were pictures of it or whether or not somebody saw it, but that was one of the stories that came out as well.
And then when we had the puja, just to link the native Indian connections, because I think that's important. And if that puja, everybody from the Americas and other places had brought a gift for Shri Mataji for the puja from their collective. And suddenly we saw that nearly all the gifts had come from a native Indian tribe from their place. Like I remember Phil Trumbo bringing some beautiful vase that had been made by, I think it was the Hopis or somebody like that. And I really noticed the difference. I felt like, and also for Vancouver, they had organized, maybe Steve, you remember this better than me, but they had taken Mother's photo to a native Indian carver to make a face mask. And the purpose of these face masks was to release the power of the person from whom the mask was made. And when he saw the photo of Shri Mataji, he just kind of went, whoa, you know, the whole way her face is made, this is somebody very special. He recognized, you know, the spirituality within Shri Mataji. So they made this beautiful mask, this Indian, out of wood, was made out of wood, and presented it to Shri Mataji and told her the story behind it. And they explained that, Shri Mataji, you know, when you turn this mask 3 times and then they put it on a shelf and it releases the power of the person. So I remember her like smiling and twinkling, and then she turned the mask, you know, so that her power would be released. Yeah. Do you remember?
Yeah, the mask story, it had to do with the fact that they also had a kind of a prophecy as well, that they recognized Shri Mataji, and that when they made the mask and they saw the photograph, it was part of their understanding of a prophecy as well, of the great mother, of the goddess, in their own language. And then not too long after, there was native Indian that came. We had programs in Seattle soon after. This is all in around the same couple of years with Abbotsford and the Hamsa Puja, but we started the center in Seattle, and a native Indian named Rusty came. I don't know whether he's, you know, stuck around, but then there was also kind of a breakthrough in LA. I think Wendy introduced a native Indian leader to Shri Mataji, and I remember that conversation as well, that Shri Mataji was just saying, you people are like me, we just meditate, you're so thoughtless, you go thoughtless so easily, and you're so spiritual. So that was quite a moment, I remember, just on the native Indian theme around the same time.
No, because she said they were so close to getting their realization before the Westerners came, before the, you know, Europeans came to their country. And around in that same time period, we had done, I think Kanajahari was starting, and we'd done a play about the peace pipe from one of the Indian legends. And we presented this book to Shri Mataji in Vancouver. A lot of attention after this puja in Lions Bay. There was a lot of attention on the native Indians. How could we help them? And I remember up until that point in Lions Bay, I felt very much that the Indians in Vancouver and Canada were sort of sidelined. They were almost invisible. You know, Western people didn't pay attention to them. They were struggling in their communities. There was a lot of drug and alcohol abuse. And after this puja, I felt a huge amount left for Shudi just sort of lift off, and things started to get better for them. They started to, in their own communities, set up schools, bring their languages back, train their people to be lawyers and teachers. And I could see, you know, over the years, and suddenly also things started to be reported in the newspapers. We would actually see their elections with all their chiefs. And it was like this whole change in perception, and they started to assume their dignity back, to get back their dignity and self-respect. And I really felt that it came from what Mother was trying to achieve through this puja, and it was very very meaningful. And after we gave her this book we did this play in Kanajahari, The Legend of the Buffalo, and she talked about the native Indians who had lived on the land in Kanajahari at that first puja. And she said in Vancouver, we gave her the book and said, you know, kind of, I guess, a little arrogantly, not realizing, you know, Mother, could you please help the native Indians? And she said, don't worry about them. She said, they're fine. She said, it's you take care of your own people. They're the ones that need the help, you know. So after that, I never, you know, they're very deep people, but yes. So slight side story we've gone off onto. We should go back to Mark. We should go back to Mark.
Talking about the native Indians, I want to share just a quick story that when I came to Sahaja Yoga in 1989, June 1989, Shri Mataji had come to Toronto. And then shortly after that, I mean, I was working in a bank for some time, but shortly after that, I got a job as a manager of employee relations, like quite miraculously. And one of my responsibilities was employment equity, which I had never heard of before. And one of the designated groups in terms of employment equity were the Native Indians, the natives. That in the bank, through Shri Mataji's grace, I was able to implement a scholarship program for Native students. So when they would leave high school and before they would join the university, I became the liaison to help them to get a job in the bank during the summer, because the problem was, even though the education was happening, but the organizations, the corporations were not willing to employ even the qualified people. So we began a scholarship program where in the summer, that successfully, then we actually gave them a lump sum of city. So that was just a small contribution that Shri Mataji used me for, and I'm ever so thankful. And then this year we offered prayers to the Indigenous people of Canada for, you know, the residential schools that were, the grave sites that were discovered, for forgiveness.
Yeah.
So what happened there is you have a highly organized group, the Catholic Church, and what they really disliked about the Native Indian culture was that it was much more naturally spontaneous. It wasn't organized. And this is where a lot of the attack comes from. And the attack from bringing in, I mean, I don't want to blame the Europeans. I mean, my background also, my people came from Ireland, right? But it's a fact that you're trying to impose something that's already been imposed on you, because the Catholic Church was imposed from the sort of early Middle Ages. The Catholic Church was imposed on Europe, you see, and then they're imposing it wherever they go. And leave aside what you call the organization, and that it's organization and spontaneity. We don't need overarching organizations. And spiritualism has evolved in the East without producing anything like the Catholic Church, right? And still everyone recognizes that, say, India is a far more spiritual place, you see. So we don't need it. And I think this is a lesson for Saj Yoga as well. We don't need an organization, right? We need to be spontaneously from ourselves, connecting with each other, with nature, with our creativity, with the arts. I mean, there's so many things we can do, right? There's so many channels for our growth as Saj Yogis and for the growth of Saj Yoga, right? And this it's not a coincidence that the big villain in this in these native schools is a large organization, because they're essentially it becomes essentially negative, you know. And I think, I mean, this is another issue altogether, but I mean, the one wonderful thing in Vancouver was, in fact, that you were an outpost. This was tremendous. And when we, you know, like Felicity, but when I was coming back from London to Vancouver, and I went to see Shri Mataji to say goodbye. This is in March 1982. And I went to her feet and she said, "Do whatever you think is right." She didn't say, "Keep in touch with the organization and get your orders from some central thing," or anything. She said, "Do whatever you think is right." You know,
I have a question, because you were in Toronto, you said, in '83, and I've always wanted to understand. And then you went to India, is that right? Right after? Because we started, our family started coming to Saj Yoga shortly after Shri Mataji's stay there in October, after she did the puja that you talked about. And it was like, we came like 3-4 weeks after Shri Mataji had left, so we actually missed the public program. And you weren't there. So what happened?
He got married, I think. When did you get married, Pat?
No, I was married in January, February 1983. And the puja, then I went back to Toronto, and Shri Mataji came in October 1983. And then at that point, then I had to get a lot more serious. Shri Mataji said that she wanted me to go to India. So then I had to sort of organize things a lot in my own. I was working like, I was working 2 full-time jobs, which is not, it's not a hardship for me. I don't mind working, right? So it wasn't a difficulty, but it didn't give me a lot of time for Saj Yoga. But you know Deb Keatley, Mohan?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Deb and Michael were there, both of them, and Roberta and Paul and Sanjeev and William, they were all there at that time.
Yeah, well,
so Deb and I were Australia.
Yeah, Deb and I were working in the same place. I met somebody. I met somebody by accident, and I had done work in daycare when I was in university, and it's very easy to get jobs as a male in daycare. They're always looking for male workers. And I met somebody, and they said, "I've got the perfect job for you," and I needed a second job. So I was working with Debbie, and I didn't say anything to Debbie, but she kept coming on to me. What is it you've got? What do you know? You have to tell me. So I put her in contact then eventually with Michael Knight, and she went to Michael Knight. But then I came over to India in July of 1984. In July of 1984, I came to India, and I haven't been back. Just not that it was decided like that, but it just has never worked out. And I mean, part of it's been economic, but part of it is just the way it is, you know. And but I'm still very interested in. I mean, somebody said, "Did you leave Canada because you were tired of Canada?" Somebody asked me that. No, I wasn't. I loved it there. Really, I literally loved it. I mean, I grew up. My parents grew up on the Toronto Islands. I loved the Toronto Islands. I lived for 3 or 4 years in a place called Marmora, which is halfway between Toronto and Ottawa, out there in Eastern Ontario. And I love that, you know, and I love Vancouver when I was there. And I spent only about 5-6 months in Southern Manitoba, but I love that, you know. I mean, it's just something, it speaks to me. But I think probably wherever I went on the earth, it would speak to me. I have a really strong feeling for what the planet is doing for us, what nature is doing for us. Like that.
So looks like you're very connected to the nature, Patrick. That's why no matter where you go, you're totally at home.
Yeah, and here in India, I'm out in a rural place. I mean, it's not completely rural in the fact that we're only 50 kilometers from Pune, but you know, and that was interesting then. So it's like I got the best of both worlds, right? I'm here in a rural place, and yet Shrimati is guaranteed to come for a couple of months every year. We had a lot, you know, we had a lot of exposure to Shrimati. That was really, really one of the best parts about being here, you know, that we could go and meet her once or twice every year, when we could get personal interviews with her once or twice every year. And there were always pujas every year. There were pujas here, you know. And
Patrick, that's how Shri Mataji could work on Canada through you.
Yes, looks like it.
Well, there's a very strong spiritual, it means a Virat connection, right? I mean, Maharashtra is the place of Shri Vittala, right? And Vittala is the deity of Canada, yeah. And one of the major streams of worship here is Vittala, and Vittala is so important because it's a bridge. Means it's a movement from what was before to full bhakti, which is what Saj Yoga is, right? Means I got this from people. I mean, I remember this one guy coming in and saying, well, Shri Mataji is just the culmination of the bhakti movement. She's just brought this all into reality. Everybody she's giving realization, you know, because that's what people thought, that if they loved God and they worshiped God, and they were, I mean, there was an anti-caste movement that had social aspects as well, and has, you see, that they could get to God. But of course, until God comes and says, I'm ready to give you realization. I mean, it's an amazing piece of luck we had, isn't it? It would just happen to us, right? I mean, it's unbelievable to me that more people didn't take it up. It's just amazing. I mean, that for how many hundreds of generations of human beings wanted this, you know? And then when it comes along, they somehow can't recognize it. You know, I mean, so many people can't recognize it, but I mean, obviously the people I'm talking to have recognized it.
Yes.
but it's a tremendous piece of good luck. You know, it's an unbelievable blessing that we should, because I mean, what does Shri Mataji say, right? In so many of her talks, she says, you know, I can do this. You just have to desire it. And in some cases, we didn't even know exactly what we were desiring.
Yes.
In almost all cases. In India, maybe people had an idea, you know, but in the West, it was just there. And then you meet this, or you come in contact with this lady, and she turns out to be the Adi Shakti. And then she can give you a realization. And even when you get your realization, you don't realize, my God, the Adi Shakti is giving me my realization. It took me years to figure out what the Adi Shakti actually meant. You know, that this was the very tippy top of the pyramid of all the gods and goddesses. I mean, what an incredible privilege, you know, to be directly marked like you and I were that day at her feet, our hands under her feet. You know,
yeah, it was 16 years later. 16 years later, I'm at Kanachahari when we're just beginning to visit the land before we've built any structures. And I'm just standing there looking around the land. And it was that moment. Krishnaji had told me, for some people, it takes a long time. So there I was 16 years later, looking at all the land and the sky. And then at that moment, then I knew everything is Shri Mataji.
Yeah.
And the tears came, the recognition. But it's such a slow process of absorbing the full reality of being with her in India, connecting with her at Sahasrara, feeling that she's not over there and I'm not over here. We are one attention. And that one moment of being with her for maybe 20, 30 minutes in Maharashtra in 1982, that has sustained me through everything.
Wow. I had my big breakthrough in '85 in San Diego. Sorry. You guys were in San Diego, right, Mark?
We drove down over and over again because it was just down the coast, just 1,000 miles or something. And yeah, we would drive down to San Diego to see Shri Mataji.
2000.
Yeah, in '85, I had been in exile in Canada, in Vancouver, and suddenly I was in front of Shri Mataji's in a living room. They just created an ashram there, and everybody was allowed to go forward and wash her feet, like massage the feet in puja. And I just went from the bottom right all the way to the top, just like that, bang. And at the end of that year, then I went to India and got married. So San Diego was really special somehow. It was like magical. I think it's like, isn't it the Muladhara of America? Muladhara chakra?
Yes.
San Diego? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a real breakthrough place there for me.
We had Buddha Puja. We had Buddha Puja there in 85 or 86.
86.
Yeah, on the sand, under tents, with a huge wind. And it was Buddha Puja. They made this beautiful bodhisattva tree for Mother to sit on.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
They called for saris to decorate the stage as they did in those days. And I didn't have anything special, I didn't have any of those beautiful silk embroidery saris, but I had this plain silk pattern sari. But anyway, I thought maybe they can use it somehow. So I sent it up. And then during the puja, I noticed, you saw it was very beautifully done. And I saw that my sari hadn't been used. And I thought, that's okay, because you knew if your sari was used, in the puja, it absorbed all these amazing vibrations from the puja. So it was a really special blessing. And so I just felt it's okay, that's all right. And then at the end of the puja, after the puja was over and we were standing up, and I suddenly realized that actually my sari had been used to wrap the cushion on which Mother's feet rested. And on my altar,
that was hard luck, right?
I know. I still have this most beautiful, precious sari. But that was such an incredible puja, because when every time Shri Mataji came, when she started coming like every year, and she would do these 4 corners of North America, Toronto, Vancouver, Los Angeles, and that year it was San Diego and New York. No, it would, so not 4 corners, but obviously very important places. And sometimes she would go this way round, and sometimes she would go that way round. And you were always in Vancouver trying to manage, if she's here, will I have time to drive? A lot of drove because it was, a long way. But that was a really special puja. And after the puja, as was so common in those days, the mums would come up with the new babies, for their names, which was so lovely. And in that puja, she actually was naming so many of them from Sri Hanuman names. And I remember Anjana got her name, and then my son at the time had a different name. Mother had not had an opportunity to name him because he'd been born when we were in Vancouver and she was in Europe. And he'd been asking why he didn't have an Indian name like his sister. And I suddenly saw, all the babies going up with their names. And I said, I thought, maybe this is the right time, And I turned to him. So he's just this little 4.5-year-old. And I said, if you would like a name, now is the time. I think, you can go up and ask Shri Mataji. And he said, oh, Mum, you come with me. And I thought, I turned to someone and I said, he'd like a name. And he's asking me, I don't know, it's appropriate. And she looked at me and she said, I think he's already asking. And I turn around and he was there up on the stage. And I turn around and there was Shri Mataji holding his little hands. And she just, she would often she would just go into meditation, when she was finding the right name for the child or the baby. And she went very quiet. And then she just said, Gautama. His name should be Gautama, which is Buddha's name, which means the enlightened one, which was so special, for him. And all the names, from Shri Mataji. And maybe I can interject. When Shri Mataji first started naming babies in England, it was quite a big thing and she started with Greek names. So I remember Maureen's first child, she called Gavin's first child, she called Olympia. And then Maureen's first child was called Athena. And then someone else's child was called Marina. And then there was Innocent. And then she started moving into the Sanskrit names. And at that time, in very English England, who looked down on India still, they'd been their colony in a way, not colony, but, they had thought that they had subjugated them. Yeah. And suddenly we had these Indian names coming into our families. And so it started to work out all the conditionings of the grandparents who weren't Saj Yogis. And Shri Mataji explained that you could feel the importance of using these beautiful Sanskrit names. They were mantras. So every time you use the name for the child, it was like a mantra going out into the ether, into the vibrations. And it took some courage to, stick to using the name Mother had given and not to use any Western names. And people would look at you, how do you say that? What name is that? It was the first time that like Sanskrit words were being introduced and going into the general public. So, it's a little memory of how times have changed now, The the world is so much more international. The schools are more international, so many more different names. And but it was one of those little things, seemingly little things that Shri Mataji did that actually had a really deeper vibrational spiritual importance. So it went on for many years, this beautiful bringing up the babies and mother giving names. And eventually, by the time we got to the twins, so that was like, 15 years later, Shri Mataji had stopped, and it was like, you can choose the name, you can choose the name. But it's nice to understand why so many of the children had the Sanskrit names and the importance that mother gave to the giving of the names.
Well, one small thing I'll add to that, just because it's so funny you say this, and it reminds me of a story of my sister Seema when she was in India school, and she had the chance to be in front of Shri Mataji as well, like similar to what Gautama was, but she was already like almost 11 or 12, but she somehow wanted to be Shri Mataji as well, and so she was sitting there on the stage and she was watching all these other younger children who were at school getting names from Shri Mataji, and then she went up to Shri Mataji and said, "Can I also have a name?" Shri Mataji looked at us. "Well, you have a beautiful name. Your name's Seema. It's okay. You don't need another name." And then she went and sat down, so completely disappointed, And he looked at her and could see that she was disappointed. She said, "Okay, I'll give you a name." And she said, "Saraswati." And it's so funny today. She plays sitar, and she's very into that musical instrument. So it's like she gives a peek also, like the names are so significant. We don't understand how it works. And that you're right. It's such a small thing, but she's giving you so much knowledge into that small story. But when you said it, I couldn't remember.
The bigger picture. There's always, every little thing mother did, sometimes seemed like a little thing, but there was so much more behind it always. That's lovely. And so sometimes she didn't. Sometimes, as you said, she would say, no, this is a nice name, this suits you. And in the very early years, there were some people called Paul. And she said, no, you have to change your name, Paul, because from the Bible, he had such a bad, she said he was really a Russian. So you can't have that name, Paul. But I'm sure all that is worked out now. A lot of things that Shri Mataji did in those early years to work things out so that we didn't need to worry about it later. I mean, just this little story about drinking Coca-Cola, so we came into Saj Yoga. And of course, for my generation, no, don't drink Coca-Cola, don't go to McDonald's, that kind of stuff. Shri Mataji would just do all these little tricks to break all these conditionings. And Christine Trumbo tells this wonderful story that Shri Mataji she drank Diet Coke. She would order from McDonald's. So to give a bit of context, in the early years, if she'd invited us to her flat or we were out or somehow, and suddenly, she would know that people were hungry. And she would say, okay, we'll get some food. We'll order from McDonald's. You go down and get me a fish burger. She was and order from McDonald's. And at first everyone was like kind of, but mother says, so we have to, eat these things. And then gradually that worked that conditioning out. Okay, so you don't eat McDonald's every day, but sometimes you have it. It's okay. It was all about balance, being balanced.
I have a Coca-Cola story. Here's my Coca-Cola story. Once somebody said to Shri Mataji, I noticed you're drinking Coca-Cola. And Shri Mataji looked at the glass she was holding and she said, actually, I can drink poison.
Oh.
And Linda has a story about names.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing about names. Of course, we're telling all these stories about what happened years ago, but I just want to kind of say to the people who weren't there at the time that she's still, of course, talking to us now. And about 2 years ago in a dream, Shri Mataji called me Madhavi. And so I woke up and said, I have a new name.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
Surprise.
And without cutting that short, which is such a beautiful story, to round up the Coca-Cola. So eventually, I think, I can't remember exactly, but Christine told me how she was talking with Shri Mataji about her husband and about drinking Coke. And Shri Mataji said, oh, don't worry about drinking Coke now. I've worked it all out. It's safe now for humans to drink. So that was pretty impressive that all those years she'd been drinking this, as you said, poison,
Poison.
and clearing it for us to drink.
Wow.
Yeah. Not that we should all run out and drink Coca-Cola all the time. Anyway.
I want to
I'll
think
pass
it's
on
funny.
that.
Auntie Linda just talked about bringing it to current time period as well. And I just recently went back to Vancouver, actually just at the beginning of September. My daughter's studying there. And one of the things that you said before, Auntie Felicity, which was the Shri Mataji's room is there. And that they've really pristinely kept it and put all these things in there that Auntie Laurie started back when she was there. We went into that room and Shri Mataji is absolutely, her presence is 100% there. And it was so strong. And I think it's really important that we remember we still have these things in our own backyard, like in Canada. And that, you know, I was saying to a lot of Canadians, you know, we can't travel to US right now. We're actually not allowed to travel to, well, by car, you can fly, but we can make vacations to Canada, and to go to the ashram that we have in Vancouver would be such an opportunity right now. And to go into that room and just meditate is just absolutely phenomenal. You can't stay there long. It's so strong. You sit for a few minutes there and you feel like, now I have, you're in Mother's presence. It's the same feeling, you know, you have to kind of at some point just be, the protocol is to kind of walk back and let it be, but it's really just so strong. And I just wanted to, you know, share that with everybody who's listening today.
So it was interesting that you mentioned that, because I heard that they were sending cards to Mother's room, and I suddenly thought, oh, I think we should tell the story of how that room came about. And
Good.
so it was from one of the visits, the many, you know, that group of visits from Mother came, and it was a very, well, it was a very special visit. And Shri Mataji was actually staying in a hotel in town, but she came to the ashram, which was, you know, a fair drive out from the inner city. And we received her. We'd actually taken the back gate off so that they could drive the car in through the garden, because the front of the house had a lot of steps. So we didn't want Mother coming up the steps. So they took the back fence, half the back fence off, so that Mother's car could drive across the grass to the back door, which just had one little step, and they put a ramp. So Shri Mataji could enter the ashram that way. And so she came in and she sat in the main floor in the living room that is there in her chair. And they bought red roses for everybody. So every single person got to give a red rose and go to Shri Mataji's feet. And it was so special always when Mother came, because we hadn't seen her for a whole year, you know, and she would come. And during that year, there would always be personal things, personalities, situations, you know, it's normal, it's Sahaj life would come up. And then you just know, oh, Mother's coming. It will all clear out. It will all work out. And by the time, and sometimes you could still feel some things in the atmosphere, you know, we'd have public program, sometimes we'd have puja, and then you'd go to the airport and you'd sit at Mother's feet just as before she leaves, and she'd be chatting. And then as she would get up to go through the gates to the airplane, I would feel like it's all lifted. It's all lifted. It's like we got reset, rebooted for the next year. And this particular occasion was really very beautiful. New people got to come and meet her and give her the roses. And then they had prepared this room, the small room next to the kitchen, and they had turned the bathroom completely, made it beautiful for Mother's use only. And it had been prepared as a restroom for her. So they had set it up with her bed and, you know, beautiful things for her. And so she went and she laid down in this room, and we were all sent out into the garden so that nobody would disturb her by being in the house. And I went out, and I remember I was sitting in the garden, and suddenly I just felt like waves of vibrations coming out from Mother's room, just waves like an ocean, just flowing over us, just washing us with vibration. And I remember looking up into the sky and sort of across the garden fence into the road. And it felt like we were completely in this bubble. You know, we were in the bubble of the divine, and the world was out there. And we were in this bubble of vibrations. And after Mother left and then later went back to hotel and left the country, it was decided that this room would forever be Mother's room. and was left set up like that. And as Mohan said, it's a small room, but I've had the experience of being in Shri Mataji's house early in England, where Mother lived. And I remember when you walk into where Mother's living, it's such a unique feeling. It's hard to put words on. The only way I could describe it is that I felt like I was in Mother's womb, like I'm just surrounded with her vibrations and love and care. And when I go into that room, I feel the same, like Mohan said. Mother is there, you know. It's very special, and you don't need to be there long, but you know, we spent many times sleeping on the floor around Mother's bed. The ladies would be invited into her room to sleep with her, because when we were staying in the early years, we stayed in people's flats. They would host her, and everyone would be, the men would be in the living room, and Mother would invite the ladies in because there was not space. And that same feeling of just sitting in front of the altar in Vancouver, in Mother's room beside her bed, it's really special. And we're very blessed. There's not every country has that beautiful gift that, you know, Mother gave us, that she came and she just vibrated the whole place. And she bought this ashram, and she said that she was buying this ashram to establish Shri Ganesha. We needed an ashram to establish Shri Ganesha for not just for Vancouver. She also bought the house in LA, and she said that having her houses at this down the west coast at the top and the bottom would prevent the fault. You know, it's on a fault line, and they're always in danger of earthquakes, that it would prevent the earth from falling into the sea. So yeah, so it's a very beautiful place. And on behalf of, as Mohan said, on behalf of all the Vancouverites, and where we used to live in the ashram, I know everyone, it is a house for all Mother's children, and particularly Canadians, and everyone is welcome to go. And in fact, I was there recently, and I've been in Chelsham Road in London, which was the first ashram, the first house, the first temple. Mother said, this is the first temple in history to a living deity. And so many pujas and weddings in Chelsham Road in London. The vibrations are amazing. And we had a young couple came to visit London, and I took them to the ashram. I thought, I want to give them this special experience of being there. And we meditated all together. And afterwards they said, oh, it's just like being in Vancouver ashram. And I went, I was a bit shocked, you know, I went, oh, really? And then I was back there last year in the spring, this spring, and I went in and I was meditating, and I went, he's right. It is like Chelsham Road. Somehow Mother has blessed us with this incredible depth of vibration in the ashram. And I know Toronto has a beautiful center too, but you know, anyway, this house with Mother's bedroom, and it's a bit of a special place.
When I heard, I think that was 95, right? I heard Shri Mataji had bought an ashram in Canada. I thought, oh, wow, probably Toronto. Oh, Vancouver. And then I heard it was Surrey, where I grew up and where I spent my youth. You know, I used to steal cars in that area. And I was like, I couldn't believe Surrey had such a bad reputation, you know.
It did.
It was 22 blocks from my mom's house, you know, where I grew up, where I went to high school.
It was the one place that we'd never had ashram, because it was a kind of a rundown place. But then all the Indians started coming, Indians from India, and moving into that area, and the whole vibration just started to change. You know, they brought this sense of family and good nabis, and Shri Mataji bought her house in this Indian area.
Yeah, it was a nice built up area.
Big
you know, it's a
blessing.
beautiful house. And this year, you'll be so happy to know that the Yogis did a lot of work on the inside, renovating, as well as the Yuvas. They did a lot of work in the garden. So it's quite upgraded.
Wow.
So we'll make sure
Nice.
that photos are shared with you all, so you can see the progress of Sad Yoga.
My sons were sending us photos, and one of my sons has just gone back, and he just got married actually in Cabela. And I said to him, why are you going back and not going to live with your wife? And he said, Mum, because there's projects we started in the garden, and I need to go back and help finish them, so it's done properly.
Nice.
it's really
Yeah, so
amazing to me that
congratulations, Felicity,
the
Thank you.
Devendra's marriage.
Yeah, continue, Mark. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
what amazes me is William Blake's writing that the lamps will be lit in Surrey.
In the Surrey
And
Hills, right?
was he writing about England? And it turns out that the
Well,
first
he was
yogis
writing it.
are
He
from
Yeah.
Surrey, White Rock, and Delta, all of which are sort of contiguous. And then where does Shrimataji purchase an ashram? Surrey.
It's true.
Well-
I hadn't made that connection until you made it this year. You know, we know that the divine has many layers of subtlety and vibration. I'm sure. Yeah, there you are.
Well, I would think,
three of
you
the
know,
three of the early five are all from the Surrey area.
Amazing.
well, I was thinking, Mark,
And I
after
should say,
you
I
said
grew
this,
up. Sorry, I just finished. I just remembered. I was born in Richmond, in Surrey, in England, and
Oh,
I moved to
yeah, I
Vancouver.
grew up in Richmond and Surrey in the Vancouver area. Richmond and Surrey.
Whoa.
Amazing.
Mark, I was thinking you said this, and I didn't catch it at the time, but then you sent out the tape of that conversation, and I watched it, and I heard it then. And I think, I mean, one of Shri Mataji's complaints when she was asked about what, you know, what the nature of the place she was in, you know, people would say, you know, what she would say, well, it's hard to tell because the names aren't right in North America. You see, the names weren't right because the Europeans, mostly the English to begin with, just came over and stuck the name on of whatever
Yeah.
place they came from, right? But it could work out right too, couldn't it? Somebody could have felt that the vibrations there were the same as the vibrations in Surrey in England,
Yeah.
and given that name, you see. So that, I mean, God
Yes.
knows, I mean, if you name 10,000 places, you've got to get the odd one right, right?
Actually, I heard the story. The guy was in New Westminster, which is across the river, and he looked over to the wilderness of Surrey, and he said, "That just looks like looking over the Thames to Surrey on the south side of the Thames." And so they said, "Surrey, it's Surrey."
but the fact that the quote from Blake so gels with
Yeah.
the ashram
Yes.
being built in Surrey.
Maybe it's like
means that
maybe
they're-
it's like the
It's
place
true.
of Shri Krishna in India and the Great Lakes, Dwarka. You know, maybe in England.
Well, the
and in-
interesting thing is those islands. One end of the islands is called Wards,
Dwarka.
which is Dwarka, which you know comes close. I mean,
Yeah.
I you know.
Oh my goodness, I never thought of that. Ward's Island. Yes.
Yeah.
Center Island, Ward's Island.
Yeah, my
Dwarka.
my grandmother lived, well, she lived on Sander for a long time, and then when they tore down all the houses on Sander, then she had a place at Wards. And
Dwarka.
the Warka. I mean, it's quite an astounding idea, really. But it means that that's established there, right? Somehow
Yeah.
those vibrations are there, right?
Yeah, it's true,
And also, you know, the vibrations, the Vittal Rukmini vibrations are there. I mean, they must all be there. And you were talking about, you know, Srimataji talking about Vishnu Maya and, you know, the lightning. But Vishnu Maya, if you read the 84 names of Vishnu Maya, and I say them once or twice a week because the last name of that is she should be worshipped every day,
Oh.
right? So I put a lot of attention on those, and an awful lot of her names are integrative names. She's one of the names is Virat Prapini, the one who integrates you into the Virat.
Wow.
Another one is she's Atma Sakshatkar Nirmala Karini. She clears the path for Atma Sakshat. And another one is Saja Yoga Parisamarpana Rupa. She's the form of becoming completely dedicated to Saja Yoga. And then she's the body of the Virat. Virat, Vishnu Maya Virat Angana. She's the body of the Virat. Right? And this is all there, you see. And it's also important. And the other day I know these names pretty well, right? So I somehow, all of a sudden, one of the names is Mahabharat Karini.
Yes.
Right? And it all of a sudden struck me that when I was going on this name, after all, I've suspected this, but this seemed like absolute proof for me. She's the one who creates these great disasters, not as punishment, but to push people towards integration. So the COVID is from her. You know,
to make change so people will
to
evolve.
make change, right? Where I don't think, I read people on Facebook and that they're upset about COVID, and you have relatives that die from it or something like that. But as Srimati said, well, everybody's going to die, so that death is not the major thing. But what has it done? It's pushed people closer together.
Mhm.
And it's pushed people to look at things beyond the material, which is really the big problem everywhere, is that we give so much importance to the material. You see, when it's really relatively unimportant. You guys talk about it, Mark and Ed, and you guys went through times when you had materially almost nothing, but Srimati was sorting out your vibrations.
Yeah, three trips to India, I had no money. The first time a relative died and my mom gave me some money. The second time a relative died and mom gave me some money of that estate. And then the time I got to India to get married, I borrowed all the money. I broke the fundamental rule of don't go to India tour on borrowed money. And that was the year that Shrimati said, I have this lady from America. Her name is Linda.
Madhavi. You mean Madhavi, right?
Yeah. Are you calling yourself that now, Linda? Should
Not
we be
really,
calling?
but you can. Please feel free.
Mark and Madhavi, how lovely.
So suits you. It's really beautiful.
Madhavi Taylor.
Srimati gave us names when we were married. Warren Reeves was there, and he said, ask Srimati for a name. So I did. And he gave me Pranava. But I've never used it. But he also gave Madhuri the name Pradnya.
Pragnya.
They're matching names, actually, if you look at them. Right?
Yeah.
Very beautiful.
And she did use it. So she had the amazing thing of completely changing her name. Because in India, your middle name is your father's name until you get married, and then it's your husband's name. So she went from being Madhuri Sadashiva Abnave to being Pradnya Patrick Redican, like that. She just completely changed, and she's very daring. I don't think she gave the proper impression in when she was talking, that she was talking about how she talked to her mother and that, but basically she made the decisions. And she's trying to make it look like she was a conventional.
I
but
remember
basically
her.
she
I
decided.
remember her. She was very brave and forthright in a nice way, in a Durga way. You know,
Yeah.
she had these qualities of Durga. How
'Cause
to be.
the things we've done here have not been simple or easy, right? I mean, running a school here for 25 years, the basic, you know, what happened within the school, the teaching and all that sort of stuff, you know, the curriculum, I could handle that. I had a clear idea of what to do, a clear vision and like that. But all the business of dealing with the different government levels and the politicians and the bureaucrats and everything like that, that was all her. And she just went out, and the buildings, she did the buildings. She's a frustrated architect engineer, right? She's always building something. And she did all this. I mean, the reason that she could handle the bureaucracy, because the thing about the bureaucracy in India is it tends to be rather corrupt, but they're very sensitive about being thought of as corrupt.
Oh.
So you have to treat them like people. In fact, we've almost never got asked for money, only once, when we were getting the permission for the 11th and 12th standards. But almost everything just worked out. But she knew how to go in there. And the trick is, who runs these offices? In India, the offices are run from the bottom up. It looks like the top down, but it's the bottom up. So you have to go in and talk to the clerks and the secretaries and peons. You know what a peon is? The sort of servants.
Yeah.
Who have their own ego, let me tell you. You see. And you have to be nice to everybody, and you have to get the file moved from one table to the next and from that table on and that sort of thing. And she knew how to do this. Instinctively, she knew how to do it, but partially it was because she had this wonderful Vishuddhi, and she can relate to all human beings as human beings. You know, we were talking about this. I saw in the conversation we had, what, 4 or 5 months ago, you know, that people were very harsh in Canada at first, right? Because and in Sahaja Yoga in general, you see. But if you just treat everybody as a human being, and a human being is worthy of respect, you see, and she has that in her. And so the whole thing here only happened because she could do that, you know.
Great.
And that's such a quality from Shri Mataji, because that's what we always saw with Shri Mataji. She would always talk to everyone with respect and graciousness, and she would make everybody feel special, worthy. She would make everybody feel worthy.
She pays attention to everybody. In 2003 or 4 or something like that, she was in Ganapati Pule, and we hadn't gone that year. You know, Srimati went to Ganapati Pule, and she was leaving from Ratnagiri, and my eldest brother-in-law was in the railway police, and he was at that point he was based in Ratnagiri, you see. So he went to the station. He found out that she was leaving, and he went to the station. Now, he's not a Sahaja Yogi. Everybody else in the family is Sahaja Yogi, but he's not a Sahaja Yogi. But he's Srimati is the family deity, right? So he went to her, you see. And people said, oh, well, best of luck. She's not seeing anyone. She hadn't met with anybody during the 5 or 6 days of the seminar there. She hadn't individually met anybody, you see. But he had the flowers, and you know, Indians never actually take any no for an answer, right? Because you never know what's going to happen. And she came along and she recognized him. And she hadn't seen him since our marriage. So this would be more than 30 years, right? And she immediately recognized him. And then she sat down and talked to him about everything in our family. And she knew things that had happened in the school that we hadn't told her yet. And she asked me, how did this work out and what's going on with that and everything like that. She was complete attention. You know, her attention was there on everybody, you know, and she got, we hadn't been able to talk, we hadn't managed to get an interview with that year, and we got everything taken care of by the one person in the family who wasn't a Saj Yogi, because Shri Mataji decided that was, you know,
It was his turn.
that was there, you see. And it was just astounding all the time, everything that I've seen her do or heard of her doing or anything like that. It's just astounding that we can, and those are the qualities that we can take from her. Those are sort of, I mean, she's sort of superhuman, but those are human qualities, you know, kindness and attention and interest. When somebody tells you something, you listen, and when you see something, you pay attention, you know. And I don't know, we still have, I mean, definitely I have a lot to learn anyways, but it is, you know, it's something so marvelous. And I think it's all still there. This is, I think Linda was getting at this, you know, things that happen now, you know, things that are going on now. All right, Shri Mataji's not physically there now among us, but she's still there. It's just the same. Nothing's changed. Her presence is the same, right? And she's expecting us to manifest some of that, you know. And I mean, the new Saj Yogis, people who have come in since Shri Mataji took Samadhi and that, and I talked to some of them, and they're very impressive. And I mean, I think we have to really encourage people to see this, that Shri Mataji's still there, that you're not dealing with some sort of organization that's trying to remember Shri Mataji.
Yeah, like in India, they do that a lot. Huh?
It gets a bit extreme.
But I know.
You know, I want to just, sorry, I just want to say, in terms of the Shri Mataji being here, that name came amazingly not from a dream that I had. It was very interesting where it's a long story, I won't tell the whole thing, but I was basically in a very uncomfortable vibrational situation with my family. And before going to bed that night, I tried to clear out, but anyway, I said, Shri Mataji, I need you. And then I went to bed. And in the morning, it was actually my birthday the next day. And I got a call from Victoria Zvilut, my sister. And she said, I had a dream last night with Shri Mataji. And in the dream, she was working on your center heart.
Wow.
And it was in that same dream that later on she said, and Shri Mataji called you, and she called you Madhavi.
Wow.
It was my birthday.
Birthday present.
Yeah.
I think that's a very important point, because you know, I have people so often who come up and say, oh, you're so lucky, you spent all this time, you know, with Shri Mataji personally. It must have been so special in those days. And of course, on one level, yes, it was. But on another level, it was extremely hard. And you know, a lot of sacrifices, only they weren't sacrifices. But And I say, but now is the time to be living in. And as you say, Linda, Mother is everywhere. She's still there for us when we need her. She's still guiding us, instructing us. And yet we're living in this, for me, I just feel we're living in this amazing time with so many yogis and just this, you sit to meditate or you sit down, and it's boom, it's there. And Mother's there. And you just put your attention on wanting to be one with Mother, and it's there. She's just there. In the old days, you had to really work on yourself, and you just couldn't wait till you saw Shri Mataji, because then you would feel better, and all this stuff would fall off. And she was just so much care in the beginning, because it was so hard. It was so difficult. There were so few vibrations everywhere, and she was trying to inspire you and show you, it's okay, stick with this, it's going to be all right, this is what it's going to be like. You go to puja and boom, it's amazing, and she go, yeah, see, this is what we're reaching for. And then you go home and the next day it's like and so, but now it's so different, and it's so incredible to see her vision, so much of her vision come true. And sometimes it's really important not to get overwhelmed with the negative stuff that we see outside in the outer world, because it's all just being exposed, being exposed. And this is what we've learned over the years, how Mother works through, in the beginning, in those early years, in those talks I was there, she would talk all the time about Christianity, exposing all the things that were wrong with it. And she went through all the religions and the church and things like that. And then we've just gone through levels and levels and levels. And of course, I've been waiting all this time for Mother to work out materialism, because as people have said today, this has been the sticking point for so many people. And so it's really important as yogis that we focus on what Mother has given us, is giving us inside, that is there. And we just have to let go of the other stuff and just keep, bringing our attention back to where it really is. And really you feel it inside. I feel that we are all feeling inside so deeply now, and so beautiful to have an opportunity to look back over. I was thinking today, 40 years, that's a really long time, since the beginning of Saj Yoga in Canada and in so many countries. And as we said, I feel like I've lived so many lifetimes in this one lifetime, and we've just seen so many beautiful changes, and maybe we will see more countries celebrating their 40 years, and that we can enjoy with them. And so many people have stories. America has so many stories to share.
I had a couple of dreams with Shri Mataji in the last year, and both of them, Shri Mataji wasn't just sitting there like a goddess. She was working really hard. She wasn't talking. She came along and worked on something, and she got me to do something, and then she got up and went and did a foot soak and left. And then the next dream, she was again coming through a big hall and working on people. And another one, she was in a little house, and then we were all waiting outside, and she just came out like a thunderbolt. She jumped in the car and they were gone. She didn't take any flowers or anything. And basically she's just working like full on the whole time. And I was really impressed by that. I thought, wow, I should also work more hard,
Also, looks like this is only part one.
Yeah, I think so.
Of more parts.
Yeah, we'd
to
like
come.
to hear. Yeah, we need the stories from 1990 onwards.
Yes.
And also
So-
of establishing Saj Yoga in Montreal and Quebec. I mean, we've had today about Toronto. Yeah, we'd like to. And I think it would be really nice to have a Zoom or, a recording of the children like Mohan, born to that whole generation, because my daughter Shreya was saying to me the other day, she said, Mummy, people forget that I also have been in Saj Yoga nearly as long as you. And I was there with Shri Mataji, and she was telling me, she said, I was 3, but I remember the puja in San Diego where Gautama got his name. I remember Shri Mataji there. I can feel the feelings that I felt when I saw her, But now, now Mohan, you're all older and you can articulate those experiences. And I feel that's a whole different level of experiences that I would love to hear more about and enjoy. Just a suggestion.
People who met Shrimataji without 25 years of crud
Yeah.
stored in their chakras.
Oh, we were working on things like that in my time. But just to like echo what you said, it's funny, when you were that age, you didn't realize like you were a kid, you know, you just experienced it as a yogi. And it's funny, you have a different perspective, and you know, so yeah, absolutely. Part 2 or part 3, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't see today Diane or Louise Ruellen at all on the group, and it would be so nice to hear.
Diane was invited. Yes.
Patrick Lantoine. I think if you say we'd like to focus on Quebec and Montreal, and you know that because for many years it was just Vancouver, Toronto, and Quebec and Montreal. You know, they would come if they know that maybe.
Yes. Today the goal was to invite the very early yogis as part 1. So the very early yogis were invited, but also yogis were invited from some of the other provinces. So Diane was invited, and so was Robert. Robert is the one who actually started Sahaja Yoga in Montreal.
Yes, I saw him there.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say hi.
Is Robert here?
He was.
I remember him from Vancouver when he was in Vancouver.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so Robert and Lisa. They have a pottery studio in a place called Magog. Beautiful pottery studio. And so Lisa is working today. She works in a hospital now, and they're extremely busy because of COVID. So she wanted to be there, but she couldn't. And I believe that Robert was going to join via YouTube.
No, I saw him. I saw him on.
I was pretty sure I saw Robert's phone, and then I tried to tell him, you know, I can see the ceiling, but I can't see your face. So
no, I saw.
But I don't see him now. But he was invited.
Yeah, I saw him also.
And we invited, you know, yogis from different provinces so they could talk. But we figured that, you know, we'll start with the decade. We'll start with the 80s. Then as we go on to the 90s.
We dominated the conversation.
80s, I mean, I think 80s will need a part 2. There's so much to share because you've all gone into different countries and you have, you know, so much to share with us. So it's just just to talk about how tough it is sometimes when, you know, in the early days, even for us, I came in 1989, and my first India tour was 1989 in December. I think Mo and you were also there the same year. And I remember on our way back, so, you know, you're in bliss when you're on the India tour. Then as we were flying back, I could feel my sasrara, like, you know, kind of feeling blocked. And I thought, oh my goodness, what's going on? I mean, my sasrara was completely open while I was in India. So as we were heading back, you know, it was really a lot of workout, heavy duty workout for us in those days. And with Mother's grace, you know, we've survived. And I find that some of the newer yogis that come now, they're really very deep.
Yeah.
They haven't seen Shri Mataji, but their recognition is very, very deep. It's quite profound.
Yeah.
So
we don't have to give,
you know, different
we don't
jobs,
have to give introductory programs anymore. We talk to them basically like they're our peers. And Shri Mataji's been working on them, and they really understand the most subtle aspects of their evolution. There's no sort of A, B, C, D. It's now just X, Y, Z.
Yeah. Well, she said that as we go deeper, you know, it has this ripple effect out into the society. And so people out there who are seekers are also going deeper. And then they come in at the level we're at. So that matches with what you're saying, Mark, you know, that new people now are really
very deep. So we have a question.
Plus, she said that Sahaja Yoga is just one of my forms.
Yes, that's right.
We think we're doing Sahaja Yoga, but Shri Mataji is working on the whole world and all the seekers of truth. And then it's so miraculous when you meet them, and there's that recognition on both sides. They're there with you at Shrimaji's feet almost instantly. And you can be in a high school with kids and you say, put your hand on top of your head, and you realize that it feels just like you're in India with Shrimaji. The Shrimaji's attention is always there.
Cool.
So all that work Shri Mataji did on the early yogis and all the penances that you had to go through, you've now become these tremendous instruments. So the vibrations are flowing through you completely unobstructed.
That's not what you think of in daily life, but it's true.
Yeah, it's extraordinary how much we continue to change and grow and evolve, and there's no upper limit that you think, okay, I've reached the top. Yeah. I'm satisfied. There's nothing more to be achieved. Whatever I've accomplished or not accomplished, it's more than I could ever have dreamed of. And then Shri Mataji says, here's a special gift for you. And yes. you've never had that experience before. So in the past 12 months, through the miracle of COVID, I felt what they call the wind, the spiritus, the actual movement of the air, like not just a steady coolness, but an actual like an ocean breeze for the first time.
Wow, cool. Wow. You're working out the Vishuddhi.
Wow.
So where we're headed is all Shri Mataji's got it worked out, and we just have to keep saying, Shri Mataji, how can I please you today?
That's so sweet. That's really sweet.
And my new statement is, Shri Mataji, I know that you've got everything timed all the way through. And as soon as I say that, I go, what was I thinking all the time? Worrying about things.
Yeah, that's a good one. Shri Mataji, you've got this. You've got this.
You got it all timed out. All worked out already. It's all worked out already, actually.
Yes, there's human time and then there's divine timing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Surrender. There's a lovely quote of Mother.
So we have a question. We have a question about the 1984 Pandharpur Puja. Were you there, Patrick, by any chance?
All right, 1984, which puja?
The puja in Pandharpur.
Pandharpur. I was there, but I have only the photographs. I have no memory.
Okay.
Oh, I think Richard was there too. Yes, he was. I think I'll ask him. Wasn't he on that tour? Yeah.
No.
No.
Dave Dunphy was there. I know that for sure, and strongly remembers it.
It's in
the messages.
But he was on that tour. Oh, maybe. Anyway.
I've watched.
Messages. Oh, sorry. Please go ahead.
I've watched the tape of that puja. It's an extremely important puja because Pandharpur is the place of Sri Vittala. But I think she's doing the Shivratri puja.
Oh, yeah, that's such a good talk, that one, yeah.
I know, it's amazing. You felt it was historical. You know, you get these moments where you feel like Mother was just moving us to a different plane, and that was one of them.
Yeah, it was really good, yeah.
And I just felt it was, when I said, again, what you were just saying, you just felt that something extremely big was happening there. Yeah.
There's actually, I mean, it's a whole different conversation, but there's many moments that either said or I felt, oh, whoa, this is a historical thing. Like, it's just brief, when we went, when the year my elder son got married, Shri Mataji called, she asked for Yuvas to go to Australia. She said, I want 21 Yuva marriages, you know, and we went, and he was one of them, and I was there. And I felt, after the marriage ceremony, I literally felt like the heavens had opened and the devas were just showering flowers down. And you can't, you know, it's hard to describe in words. It's something you just feel inside you, this weight of something terribly important, and who knows why, but you know, that was one of the two.
That happened at the marriages now where Devendra got married in Kabela.
It felt like that too.
Many people said they felt it was a whole new dimension, because I've been there every puja for 12 years, and it was just like walking into a different world or something.
It was incredible. And what was interesting was that so many of those couples, not all, but so many, had been born in Sajoga and grown up and gone
true,
to school. You know, like they were all friends together. And there was just something. And I was reminded again of Mother saying, you know, it's the children that will change the world. And we can see that. We can see them all doing it.
And many said it brought hope, because some people feel with the pandemics and everything what's going to happen, but now they're all getting married and they're going to have kids, and it's going on and on.
Well, I think, you know, we're very blessed in our family, because we had Mother blessed us with 5 children at different stages. So we have, you know, there was 14-year gap between the eldest and the youngest. So I got to see and experience the different children at different stages of Sajoga. And because of their different ages, they keep me connected with all the young people of their age. And it's really a beautiful blessing, because we can see firsthand how they're changing, how they're growing, how deep they are, and how they're, you know, moving out into the world and taking their place. And I feel that for people who don't, you know, I really recommend everyone to try to get to know the young people, you know, themselves, make connections as aunties and uncles, because they're so sweet, they're so humble, they're really respectful, they really seem to
and the young people are nice too.
No. You know very well I'm talking about the young people. Yeah, so anyway, it's a very lovely relationship to have with them, and it's a big blessing. It's really a beautiful blessing that Mother's given us all these children and all these young people. Yeah,
it's an amazing generation that's coming up. I totally agree with the vibration from Kabbalah. They were so strong. We were connected over the internet, and they were so powerful. You completely felt you were in the presence of Shri Mataji.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, and that you were there. Yeah, the dancing reminded me.
Very
There was
powerful.
a tour in India where they had this big fire, and suddenly they were calling everyone up to dance in front of Shri Mataji. Come, dance, take your turn, you know, dance in front of Shri Mataji. And that's what you could see. And that's what at the marriages in Kabbalah this year, it felt the same, that they're all dancing and Mother is there. I'm sure she was.
A couple of messages through. So a message from Shashank that he met Uncle Patrick in India. So Shashank from Toronto had visited you. So he's sending his regards. Shashank is actually the IT person. He's handling the Zoom and everything for us. He's very precious. Rajeshri Buriak, she said she met Patrick in 1990, 1991. And Patrick was speaking fluent Marathi with us. So you remember Raji and speaking Marathi to her. So and then somebody else is saying, very often I used, so this is Kanchan, another message from Kanchan. Very often I used to see Patrick in various pujas in Pune. I also had a desire to work in his school after my college days, but it could not happen. And he is more Marathi now. So Patrick, I think you have to say something in Marathi after.
I think we'll leave that for another time. I mean, I have a good vocabulary, but my accent is still horrendous. So.
It's like my German. I call it cowboy German. So you know cowboy Marathi.
Something like that, yeah. Great Lakes Marathi.
Yeah, right.
So amazing. So if we can have a commitment, it would be so awesome to have a part 2, because even I don't think we've completely even gone through the 80s, the 90s. And this is such an amazing idea that someone suggested in our active. It was actually Vikram who suggested this from our collective to do this for the 40-year celebrations. And there are lots of yogis who will be listening to the recording, who are either listening right now through YouTube or others who could not join, who will listen on. So we're so thankful for each of you taking this time and joining us. And please come again. We thank you so much for starting Sahaj Yoga in Canada and going through all those penances to create such a foundation.
By the way, this has been 3.5 hours.
Pranav and Pradnya. I know. So
3.5.
Thanks to Pranav and Pradnya Redican. Thanks to Mark and Madhavi Taylor. Thanks to Felicity and Richard Payment, and to you, Edwin, Richard. Thank you so much. And if anyone would like a short meditation, any one of you would be really awesome, just for a couple of minutes.
I think I have to get up and move.
Felicity, would you like to do that just so we can?
I think we could just sit and enjoy in silence together for a little bit. If you have a photo of Mother, let's just close our eyes and thank Shri Mataji. Thank Shri Mataji from the bottom of our heart. Thank you, Mother, for all you have given us, for all you have shown us, for all you have shared with us. Oh, Mother, thank you for allowing us to be part of your great vision, of your journey to change humanity. Please open our sasraras as wide as you can, so we flow with you in your ocean of love, of divinity. Although we can only know a small part of you in your divinity, O Mother, we humbly ask for the blessing that you fill our beings with your being, that every cell of our being be as one with you, for always. And may we fully know all the beauty and qualities of your being as Shri Krishna in all his different aspects. Do we pray and desire from the fullness of our hearts that he manifest through you All the deities are within you. They come from you. They are you. May you, as Shri Krishna, manifest all your powers through the Americas to guide, inspire, and change the world to become the world of your vision, that all humanity may transform itself as a reflection of the pure spirit of your holy being. Most holy being, we humbly bow at your most holy feet. We can raise our kundalinis and humbly give bandhan, and bow at Mother's feet.
November 3rd, 2021. On behalf of all the Yogis, to our early brothers and sisters, taking the time to joining us and for sharing such beautiful, precious recollections, memories, wisdom, part one of more parts to come. Jai Shri Mataji.
Jai Shri Mataji.
Jai Shri Mataji.
Jai Shri Mataji.
Krishna.